Good morning. Welcome to the study agency meeting. So we have governing board members participating in person and on video, Zoom video. The regular governing board meeting will begin immediately following this meeting. So the first item of business.
First item is roll call.
Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
Mr. Couch?
Here.
Mr. Perea?
I'm present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Rickman?
Here.
Ms. Sheklian? Ms. Sheklian, can you hear me? I see that she's present. Mr. Wheeler?
I think I'm here.
And Mr. Mendez?
I also think I'm here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum. Item number 3 is election of officers.
So with that, I think we go to a rotation. You'll take this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm
I can
trying to
provide a
get
little
rid
bit
of
of
this.
background.
can't.
Happy to assist with just laying out the policy on this, which was adopted by the study agency board. And there is a rotation that's established as part of the officer selection policy. It's a schedule that supports the annual selection of the chair and vice chair, which are the items for consideration right now. It designates that the chair and vice chair are selected annually, and it's based on a county rotation. And so based on that rotation, the recommendation here is to elect the chair and vice chair as follows. So the chair would be the representative from Merced County, that would be Supervisor Pereira, and the vice chair would be the representative from Kern County, that would be Supervisor Couch. That's consistent with the policy adopted by the study agency board. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for action.
Okay, we do need a motion.
I move to appoint Supervisor Pereira as chairman and Mr. Supervisor Couch as vice chair.
Second. I got a motion and a second.
Through the chair, I'll call for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, take roll call. Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman? Mr. Rickman?
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Sheklian?
Here, times 2, yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
And Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 4 is approval of consent calendar, items 8 through 10.
What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Or is there any public comment on the consent calendar for the study agency? Seeing none, I'll call roll call. Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch?
Yep.
Mr. Pereira?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Ms. Sheklian?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
And Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 5 is public comment. I see no indication of public comment on Zoom, and there are no members. 1 second. We do have a raised hand. I have Connie Young and Janet Dietz-Kamay. This is the study agency meeting. I just wanted to confirm whether you wanted to speak for this meeting or the governing board meeting, which begins next. Okay. Looks like Ms. Dietz-Kamay still has her hand raised. Oh, it looks like she took it down. Okay, I see no public comment on this item. Item number 6 is governing board member comments.
Well, I guess I'll start. Thank you for electing me chair. Any other board members wish to comment?
The
Congratulations.
sentence is only 1 year.
See no other comments?
Okay.
I see no other comments on this item. Item 7 is other business.
Is there any other business to come before us?
Seeing none? Through the chair?
I moved or call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
We're ready to go? All right, I'm going to call this governing board meeting to order. Good morning and welcome. This morning, you'll notice that the current Chair Reyes, is not here today. I'm filling in, so I hope everyone will grant me just a little bit of latitude. We have board members participating in person and on Zoom video conference. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation on Zoom, in person, and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. This will ensure that we do not hear any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. During the meeting, all public participants, except for board members and district staff, will be placed on mute by the host. The public members will be asked to unmute when it is their turn to speak. Only board members and staff will be visible on Zoom. Members of the public will be asked to unmute themselves once they are recognized to make public comment. Members of the public attending on Zoom can press the raise hand button at any time during the agenda item to indicate they wish to speak on that item. After each agenda item presentation, the chair will open the public comment period. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. So I just wanted to make that known. I'll turn it over to Michelle for roll call.
Mr. Bessinger?
Here.
Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
Mr. Couch?
Here.
Ms. Fagazi?
Here.
Ms. Lewis? Mr. Mendez?
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Here.
Mr. Pereira?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Preciado?
Here.
Mr. Rickman?
Here.
Dr. Sheriff?
Down here.
Ms. Sheklian?
Here.
Mr. Wheeler?
Here.
Mr. Reyes? Through the chair, we have a quorum. And item number 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance.
If everyone could please stand, I'll ask if Supervisor Mendez would lead us in the pledge.
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Supervisor.
Item number 4 is approval of consent calendar items 17 through 25.
Hopefully, all of the board members have had a chance to look. Are there any comments or corrections online?
Through the chair, I see no indication of board member comments. We do have a comment from Dr. Sheriff.
Okay, Dr. Sheriff?
Yeah, I just wanted to take item 19 off to add comments.
Item 19, any other items? Okay, so I generally, I don't know how you do it, but if you're okay just commenting on it, and then unless you'd like a separate vote?
Nope.
Nope, okay, so I'm gonna turn it over
Just
to
a
you.
comment, thank you. Just a reminder, item 19, it's $295,000, including $85,000 grant funding from the California Energy Commission for charging infrastructure at district offices. And I wanted to take this off the consent calendar just to give a shout out to staff and also to this board for its policy in terms of the green procurement policy, continuing to move forward on electrification of the district fleet and also the partnering that this represents with state agencies. Change is not simple. There are many parts that have to come together for success, but this is obviously a real win-win. Long-term maintenance, fuel savings, decreased emissions of criteria pollutants, contributing to state greenhouse gas goals. So it's walking the walk as we understand the transition to electrification of transportation is really essential to meeting our air quality goals. One other reason I wanted to highlight this was that the work that the district is doing, I think, represents a real model, can do for other agencies that want to move in this direction. And so I hope, I look forward to supporting in the future as the district shares this kind of expertise with other agencies and really along the model of the STAR system that we have shared with other agencies, that other agencies have looked and seen that this is a good model for them. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Vice Mayor Fugazi.
Thank you. Actually, it's interesting because I spoke to Samir about this exact consent item, wanting to make sure that all of our agencies would be able to have potentially access to these funds as we move towards electrification. And I think the timing of it is perfect, and we should be leading by example. So I'm very much in favor of this as well.
Thank you very much. And I think that just speaks to you have to have the infrastructure before you can start turning over vehicles. And because I know that they're still driving around in gas vehicles, right? But I think there's probably a plan. Samir?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to just express appreciation for those comments and let the board know that we do anticipate reporting out on those plans in a broader discussion, actually taking something to the board to discuss that, and also plan on sharing, that example with other agencies. So I do appreciate the comments raised by some of the board members here, and it is something we've been working on for some time, making this transition happen, and we want to be very aggressive with it. We found that there are savings that we've been able to realize, but also some challenges that have to be overcome that we've been able to work through here recently that allow us to move forward in this direction. And we see a lot of energy out there and a lot of funding that may be available to others at the cities and counties, educational institutions that may also want to move forward in this direction. So we plan on sharing some of that with the board, and also very much support what was stated in terms of being able to share that knowledge with others that we could also help encourage to do this as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I see no more board comments. Any public?
Through the chair, District Council Annette Ballatori has a comment. She's on Zoom.
Okay.
Thank you. I just needed to make a quick disclosure on items 20 and 21, approval of contracts for executive director and legal counsel. To summarize briefly, those contracts include, it's a renewal of contracts on the same terms as in the past, subject to a 3% salary increase on each of those contracts, which is in line and consistent with the salary increase that the board has approved for both employees at the most recent EA MOU renewals, as well as for management staff.
Thank you very much. Annette?
Through the chair, do we have public comment? See, looks like we do have one public comment. Ms. Janet Dietz-Kamay?
Good morning.
This is public comment on, on the consent calendar.
Yes. Good morning, board members, chair, and staff. I want to say how happy I am with item number 19. As mentioned, the way to get people into the electric cars is to give them opportunity to charge. And that means everywhere, including at business locations, agency locations, shopping locations, hotel locations, any location where people stop for a while, restaurant locations. And this is something I'm working, electric vehicles, and I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this
Motion
item.
to approve.
Entertained. We have a motion.
Second.
Multiple seconds. Call the roll.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco-Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 5 is public comment.
Thank you very much. Members of the public on Zoom video, please press the raise hand button so that you may be recognized to speak. Members of the public who have called into the Zoom meeting, please press the *9 so that you may be recognized to speak. Also *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Please be prepared to speak when your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number is called. Please state your name prior to beginning your public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Through the chair, we do. Ms. Connie Young.
Good morning, Connie.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Connie Young, a Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL. I hope you all had a pleasant and restful holidays, and you feel ready for whatever the new year brings. No doubt you're anxious to hear what's happening with the climate provisions, many of which will help clean our air, in budget reconciliation or Build Back Better on Capitol Hill. Well, sad to say, not much. As you probably know, budget reconciliation stalled last month, and now Congress is focused on other important matters. However, CCL has reason to believe that carbon pricing is still being considered and may be among the climate provisions included when the Senate takes up Build Back Better again in 2 or 3 months. Therefore, as behind the scenes negotiations take place, CCL volunteers are continuing to lobby President Biden and our senators to include a price on carbon with cash back to US households. If we don't want climate change to spiral further out of control, and if we don't want to breathe the harmful chemicals and particulate matter released when fossil fuels are burned, we simply have to reduce our carbon emissions. One way to do that is to make them more expensive by levying a fee on polluters. And one way to protect consumers and businesses from more expensive fossil fuels is to give the collected fees to US households. We simply have to stop subsidizing the fossil fuels that are fouling our air and overheating our planet. Let's level the playing field and let the market, meaning us consumers, choose the types of energy we want. So please use your influence on Capitol Hill to urge our president and senators to include climate provisions, specifically carbon fee and cashback, in Build Back Better. For more information and to send emails to President Biden and our senators, go to cclusa.org/take action. That's cclusa.org/take action. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next comment is Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Good morning, Janet.
Good morning. Thank you. Climate change. We are seeing absolute evidence of being affected by climate change. We had an unprecedented fire in Colorado, drought-driven. By then, Colorado should have had precipitation of some form, but having none, a fire that absolutely decimated a town occurred. Extreme weather in the USA, especially east of us, snow, heavy snow, tornadoes, floods, climate change driven. Some governors and mayors are recognizing that this damage and destruction is absolutely due to climate change. We must reduce greenhouse gases. We must reduce all sources of carbon dioxide, of the black carbon that we experience here more than anywhere in the rest of the country. And the carbon pollutant, the PM 2.5, also has its effect on COVID-19, people being weakened and becoming ill by the disease. Climate change. Please do everything in your power to help us clear this air of greenhouse gases. Everybody has to pitch in on this one, all over the world, all over the country, in every state. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Next is Thomas Menz.
Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thomas Menz. I'm a resident of Fresno County. We're under an inversion here in the Valley in Fresno County this morning. We have been this these past 10 days with no burning allowed. And thanks to monitoring in the 617 area in South Fresno, we know that monitors in Fresno County show we've been at or above 35 microgram per cubic meter health standard for all of the last 10 days. And that shows, I'm afraid, that already for 2022, we're failing attainment of the 24-hour standard for fine particulate matter. I just want to tell you this morning that, at least in my neighborhood, folks are still burning wood, and in numbers that overwhelm the level of compliance personnel that are being made available to achieve compliance and to achieve attainment. And since the inception of mandatory wood burning curtailments, I've done what I can in my small way to help abate wood burning in my own neighborhood by reporting the addresses to your compliance staff. And I regret to say this, but it's dozens every year. And it's a little discouraging to note that after more than a dozen years of doing this, I'm still finding folks, some of the same folks, who don't observe the mandatory curtailments, even in broad daylight. And at night, I fear the situation is even worse. This last weekend, I reported wood burning at 9 different residences, and you, the district, had one inspector on duty serving all of Madera, Fresno, and Kings counties. Poor fellow. He did the best he could, racing from one place to another, and he was only able to catch one of the ones that I reported. I'm sure he caught others, was able to cite them, but it's fair to say he was overwhelmed. You know, ladies and gentlemen, as your own district survey shows, most folks don't use a wood burning device, and that's consistent with my own observations. Just a few folks are spoiling the air we breathe for the vast majority of us. And as most of your politicians, I'll say the vast voting majority. So you're on the right track trying to curtail residential wood burning. But you, well, all of us, need to do more. We need to redouble our efforts, or we're going to fail attainment of the PM25 standard by 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item. Item number 6 is star recognition, service, teamwork, attitude, and respect.
This is great when you recognize Shanika, right?
Yes.
Very nice to meet you. So everyone, you'll hear me say that about staff because this is pretty much the first time I've been in this is the first time I've been in the Fresno office. I usually do this out of the Modesto office. So everyone is a welcome and nice to meet you.
Good morning, everyone. Shanika Dixon, Director of Personnel. As you are aware, recognition of employees' contributions is an essential component to the district's STAR work culture. Today, we would like to formally recognize those individuals who reached the service milestone in the fourth quarter of 2021. We have many of them with us here virtually. You'll see them start coming up on the screen. And we also have a few here in the boardroom. So we'll start off by saying, first of all, thank you all for joining us virtually. We appreciate you. We appreciate the contributions and your commitment over the years here at the district. Today, we're going to start with 5 years of service. So recognizing April Taylor, Accounting Technician, Brittany Thompson, Air Quality Assistant, Kathy Beninati, Accounting Assistant, Carrie Maslowski, Office Assistant, Sarah Hassan, Senior Air Quality Specialist. Okay, moving on to recognition for 15 years of service at the district, Claire Glashop, Air Quality Inspector, Aaron Green, Personnel Technician, Lupi Hadigi, Supervising Air Quality Inspector. In the boardroom, we have John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, Pete Biscay, Air Quality Specialist. Also in the boardroom, Ryan Kincaid, Supervising Accountant. And recognizing those for 20 years of service, Alex Krivobach, Network Systems Analyst, Brant Botil, Senior Air Quality Specialist, Iona Safavardi, Air Quality Inspector, and Tim Bush, Air Quality Engineer. Thank you all so much for your service. Again, we appreciate you and your commitment to the district throughout the years.
You typically, when you have people that are spending 15 or 20 years, that's a good part of their work life. That typically means you're a pretty good employer. And again, the employees make the organization, not vice versa. So again, on behalf of the board, I'm very appreciative of what you do on behalf of the Air District.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other comments from board members?
That's why this is the happiest place in government.
The Disneyland of government. Any other comments? Anyone?
Through the chair, I see no additional comments on this item.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 7 is receive and file annual comprehensive financial report and single audit report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'd like to introduce Mary Barati, who's our Director of Administrative Services. She leads the excellent financial team here at the Air District that works very hard to fulfill the governing board's expectation of having strong fiscal accountability, transparency. So this item is related to the independent audits that the district goes through every year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Samir. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here to present to you the district annual financial reports for fiscal year 2021. These reports are prepared by our finance team. We have some of them attending here today, actually. The district has an agreement with PricePage Company, accounting for corporation, PricePage, which they provide the annual audit, and they work hard throughout the year to look at our financial reports and report back to your board. The district prepares a report called Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, as well as Single Audit Report, which includes all the federally funded grants that the district receives. And those audits are conducted in accordance with the Single Audit Act of 1984. PricePage has completed the report of all the district's financial statements and concluded that these reports present fairly in all material respects with no finding. In other words, a clean audit report. In addition, the single audit report provided by PricePage noted that the district has no instance of non-compliance under governmental auditing standards. We have Mr. Fausto Hinojosa and Osvaldo Gutierrez, and they are joining us today. Fausto is the managing partner for PricePage, and he's the head of all audits and forensic consulting engagements of the firm, and provides strategic leadership to the firm as well. And I would like to thank him and his wonderful team that worked to complete these audits. I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to prepare a detailed presentation that includes all the process and the results, and he will be here as well as myself to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Barati, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. It's my pleasure to join you to share the results of the audit. As I've done in the past, my intention will be to be brief, but to share with you the results and sufficient information. As Ms. Barati expressed, I'm glad to answer any questions, so feel free to stop me during the presentation and or to ask any questions after it's complete. So if we can jump to the next PowerPoint, please. Very quickly, here's the agenda. Just share a little bit about the firm. We'll talk about the audit process, the areas of emphasis in this year's audit, the auditor's reports that were issued. We're not going to discuss any key financial statement items, but again, would be glad to answer any questions about those. Some required communications, and leave a minute for discussion or questions. So the next slide, please. If we can go to, yes. So the firm that, as some of you know, was founded here locally in 1976. Our specialization is governmental as well as nonprofit auditing, but we audit a number of special districts. We, I think, are in our 3rd year of contract with you. Several years ago, we were also auditing the district, so we're very familiar with the operations and the finances of the district and the excellent team that you have in place. Let's go to the next slide. I'm the engagement partner on this engagement. Osvaldo Ozzy Gutierrez is joining us as well, and he was the manager. We have another CPA, Anthony Gonzalez, who served as supervisor in this year's audit. Just briefly share that we have included some rotation. So this is Anthony's first year on the audit. We had a different CPA last year. Part of that rotation process is to ensure that there is a fresh set of eyes on the district's finances, which we believe is important. Let's go to the next slide, please. The audit process is a process that requires that we assess risks of error and fraud. And so that's always our focus. Anything that we're doing in the audit process is focused on identifying errors or fraud. And in order to do that, we need to obtain an understanding of the district's fiscal operations, obviously. And a key component of that is obtaining an understanding of the internal control systems that are in place. The audit standards require that we ask two questions about internal controls. Number one, are the controls designed effectively? Meaning if they function as they are designed, would they catch any errors and or fraud? And number two, even if they are designed effectively, are they actually placed in operation? Are they being utilized, and would they work to identify errors or fraud? Once we obtain that understanding of controls and of the district's fiscal operations across the organization, then we develop audit procedures to determine whether any of the errors that we think are material and might occur, whether any of those errors have occurred. And so we design audit procedures across various areas, and we'll share in the next slide what those areas are where we focus. But again, our job as auditors is to find errors and or fraud so that in the end, we can issue an audit opinion as to whether the financial statements are fairly stated. So let's go to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So a few areas of emphasis. If you looked at your balance sheet, you would see that cash and investments is your largest asset. And certainly because of the nature of cash, it's an area of significant focus for us in the audit. Revenues and receivables, not so much whether you receive the money, although that's critical, but whether you are recording the revenue in accordance with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board's rules. Expenditures. We look at across the organization, which obviously includes salaries and accounts payable. We're looking at the timing of the recording. We're also looking to make sure that there is adequate supporting documentation. And again, our focus in all of these areas is on two things, as I've reiterated several times: errors and or fraud. Net pension liability is a complex calculation. And it is the most significant liability on your balance sheet. And so we do spend a significant amount of time focused on that liability and determining whether it was calculated in accordance with the government auditing, the GASB rules. Finally, we did also focus on the federal award programs. Your audit is an audit in accordance with standards issued by the American Institute of CPAs. That's the financial statement audit, but also an audit in accordance with what is now known as the Uniform Guidance. And so it's also called the Single Audit Act of 1984. And any organization that receives federal funding in excess of $750,000, and I think in your case, it was about $14 million this year, is required to have a special audit of those federal awards, not only financially, but compliance. Did the organization comply with the applicable compliance requirements to earn those grants? So let's move to the next slide. So these are the results. And as Ms. Barati had already shared, you did receive an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. As I shared, the audits performed in accordance with AICPA and government auditing standards. Financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. Accounting policies have been consistently applied. A very brief note there. Some organizations can change accounting policies from year to year, and sometimes those changes are in order either to cover things up, to make things look better, et cetera. So one of the focuses in our audit is to determine whether the accounting policies have been applied consistently, and in your case, they have. The estimates are reasonable and are developed on reasonable basis. Again, the big estimate was the net pension liability. And then also the financial statements, if you go through them, you'll see that there's a few pages of numbers, but then there are a lot of pages of footnotes. And the footnotes are a critical part of the financial statements. As auditors, we're not only focused on the numbers, we're also focused on those disclosures and making sure that readers of the financial statements have all of the information that they need if they were to make a decision regarding the district. Let's go to the next slide, please. So under the Government Auditing Standards Report, there were two areas, internal control and compliance. Pleased to report that there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control. And we also did not identify any compliance matters that are required to be reported. Next slide. Here's the $14 million that I was talking about with respect to federal expenditures. This is the third audit report that was issued, and this is a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion on compliance. You complied with all the direct and material compliance requirements, no deficiencies in internal control over compliance. The schedule of expenditures of federal awards is a key part of the single audit, and that schedule was prepared and is fairly stated in relation to the financial statements. Next slide. Fine, this is our final slide. So there are some required communications as auditors. The auditing standards require that we share these bullet points with you. Significant accounting policies, as I did briefly share earlier, there were no changes. The most significant estimate was the net pension liability. Sensitive disclosures in the financial statements. If I were the board, I would be paying attention to the pension plan and that disclosure, again, the largest liability on your balance sheet. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit. If we had any difficulties, we'd be required to report those to you, but there were none. Management was transparent, provided all of the information, documentation that was needed in a timely fashion, responded to all of our inquiries in a transparent manner, and so we had no concerns. There were no significant audit adjustments in the audit, which in an audit, if an auditor finds an error, they propose an adjustment and management will generally record that adjustment. Then there can still be an unmodified or clean opinion issued. In your case, though, we did not identify any adjustments that were required. So the accounting that we received, the trial balance, the general ledger, the accounting information was already completely accurate for purposes of the audit, and no audit adjustments were required. We had no disagreements with management about accounting rules. Management did not go out and seek other opinions with respect to audit or accounting matters, which can happen in some cases. But here we had agreement with respect to the application of accounting principles. And so there's nothing to report there. Fraud and illegal acts, nothing came to our attention as a result of the audit procedures that were applied. So I think that's the last slide. I'm glad to answer any questions. I know I went quickly, but I just wanted to be respectful of your time.
Any questions of board members for Fausto? Seeing none.
Supervisor Pereira has a question.
Shows up late.
Yes. Mr. Hinojosa, as you were going through your report, you mentioned that that we should pay special attention to the pension liability. Could you explain why you did that?
Yeah, well, it is the most significant liability on your balance sheet. I think I don't know if the number is $120 million. It's a liability. You are in a cost sharing plan, but that liability is an estimate, right? It's not a hard number, and the liability can change from year to year. That estimate can change, and it can change fairly significantly based on maybe the biggest factor is the discount rate. And so there's some complexity here that I'm not necessarily prepared to get into, which can take some time. But Ms. Barati can probably share more about that with you. However, if there is a change in the long-term expected rate of return for investments, that can have a significant impact on that liability. Just as a very quick example, if, for example, you were expecting 7% return over the next 20 years, and it turned out that the returns were only going to be 5%, then your liability would be much greater. However, as we all know, what the market has done in the last couple of years at least, is that it has outperformed what those expectations were. And so the liability probably is not as high as it could be because of the expectation of returns. All of that information, we're auditors, we're not actuaries. So that information, the pension plan hires an actuary, an actuarial firm that performs that function and prepares that calculation. And so my only reason for pointing it out was because of its size, because of its complexity, and because just of the nature of it being an estimate.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Through the chair, I see no additional board member comments.
Public comment?
Through the chair, I see no indication of public comments on this item.
Okay, we have to receive this report. So, yeah, motion. Motion.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 8 is approve up to $4 million in additional funding for the continued implementation of the tune-up vehicle repair program.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'd like to introduce Brian Dodds, who's the grants program manager that oversees the implementation of this really important program, the tune-up program, to discuss where we are with it and some recommendations for the implementation of it moving forward for the remainder of the fiscal year. So with that, Brian, you could present the item.
Nice to meet you, Brian.
Yeah, likewise. So good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Samir said, I'm Brian Dodds, Program Manager in the Grants and Incentives Department, and it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning to seek your board's approval for $4 million in additional funding for the continuation of the tune-up vehicle repair program. So as you're well aware, mobile sources of emissions, which the district has no regulatory authority over, account for more than 85% of the Valley's NOx inventory. The district's voluntary incentive programs are critical in reducing emissions from mobile sources in order to reach our air quality attainment goals. In recognition of the critical need for emission reductions from passenger vehicles, your board has approved the implementation of the Drive Clean in the San Joaquin program, which provides Valley residents with a variety of options to reduce vehicle emissions. These program options include vehicle repair and replacement, which are focused on low-income and disadvantaged community residents, and our rebate program, which is available for all Valley residents. Our program website provides valuable information and application resources to Valley residents looking to participate in any of the Drive Clean in the San Joaquin program options. In June, your board approved $7 million in funding for the implementation of the tune-up vehicle repair program for the current fiscal year. This funding allowed for the continuation of the phone-in participation process as well as the resumption of weekend events. The tune-up vehicle repair program provides Valley motorists with assistance to repair their high-emitting vehicle and is implemented with program partner Valley Clean Air Now. Traditionally, the program has been implemented only through weekend events rotated throughout the Valley, where vehicles are screened for the likelihood to fail a smog test. Owners of high-emitting vehicles are issued vouchers for emissions-related repairs, which are redeemed at participating STAR-certified smog shops for up to $850 in costs associated with pre- and post-smog test, diagnostic time, and emissions-related repairs. And through this process, unregistered vehicles are able to complete their registration once repairs are completed and the vehicle passes their smog test. There's just some photos from past events if you haven't had a chance to attend. They're generally, very well attended and a great opportunity to engage with Valley residents. In March 2020, in response to the COVID-19 public health recommendations, the district canceled all scheduled weekend events. In lieu of weekend events, the district worked with program partner Valley Cleaner Now to develop a new program model, which allows Valley residents the opportunity to participate in the program by contacting Valley CAN program staff directly. Since the launch of this new program model, the district has seen a very strong response by Valley residents, and we've completed nearly 14,000 repairs over the past year. This program continues to provide emission reductions from high-emitting vehicles, as well as economic benefits to residents and participating STAR-certified smog shops. The new program model is streamlined and allows Valley residents to easily participate. Residents contact Valley CAN by phone or online interest form and are able to select a smog shop in their area. Valley CAN connects the participant with the smog shop to set up an appointment, and at the appointment time, the smog shop conducts an emissions test on the vehicle, completes the emission related repairs, and then submits the invoices for reimbursement of eligible expenses. District staff review submitted invoices and provide payment back to the smog shop. And this table highlights the continued strong demand by Valley residents for vehicle repair funding, with over 6,000 vehicle repairs completed in the last 6 months. Over the past few years, the UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation has prepared several reports examining the district's vehicle repair and replacement programs, finding that the programs are highly effective in providing program benefits and reducing emissions in low-income and impacted communities. In 2020, the Luskin Center released a report discussing the district's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the continuation of the repair program. The report applauds the district's response in addition to the environmental and economic benefits achieved by the program, and concludes that the program continues to reduce vehicle emissions and improve air quality in the valley. In 2021, the Luskin Center released a report which highlights and commends the district efforts in reaching disadvantaged communities through the implementation of the vehicle replacement program. So with the easing of California's COVID-19 public health restrictions, the district and Valley CAN were able to resume weekend events in July, with 8 events held over the last 6 months. Events were primarily held in small rural communities and adapted to include COVID health and safety precautions, including social distancing, limited contact between participants and staff, and an increased use of technology to collect information and increase vouchers. 8 additional events are planned for the remainder of the fiscal year, with a return to locations able to accommodate a larger turnout, while outreach efforts will continue throughout disadvantaged communities in the valley. Weekend events also continue to provide opportunities to engage residents on our vehicle replacement program, as well as other available incentive programs, including our Clean Green Yard Machine program and Burn Cleaner. This table highlights event participation and repairs through the first 8 events. As repairs continue to be completed for these events, we expect these figures to continue to increase. And this table represents the upcoming events for the remainder of the fiscal year. We have 8 events planned and 1 in every county of the district. So at this time, the district continues to see strong participation by Valley residents in need of vehicle repairs, and we anticipate that program funds will be fully expended before the end of the fiscal year. We are currently recommending an additional $4 million in funding for the continued implementation of the repair program for the rest of the fiscal year. And this funding would allow the continued implementation of the direct participation option, as well as holding at least 8 weekend events. $3.5 million in funding would be dedicated towards vehicle repairs, and $500,000 would be available for program administration and outreach. The recommendations for today's item are here on the slide before you. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So the funding, the $4 million is coming from which bucket, the additional?
Yeah, we have some locally generated funds from DMV fees, as well as some other community incentive funds that we've been able to find, looking at our balance of funding, our mix of funding, where we're getting state funding for a variety of programs. So we actually have that money available for the purpose of this program. And fortunately, we are able to have a high demand and very productive place to use those resources. So that would be where the funding is coming from.
Perfect. Supervisor Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking on page 11. Madera had not as many cars. Only 2 counties were smaller than us, and we had the most money. We must have had some really shitty cars. We only come out. I mean, we spent $33,000 on those 132 cars, and they got Stockton had 480 cars and only spent 11,000. Amazing.
Yeah, so those numbers will continue to increase, especially for the most recent Stockton event, and we expect them to increase significantly. Each event has a different makeup of cars, and how quickly they get repaired really factors into these figures here.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people from the mountains. I told them to go down there, so maybe they did, because we got some cars up there that really need it. So thank you. I've seen that. I go, wow, that's quite a jump there.
And for all the children listening, he said chitty, chitty, bang, bang. He was talking about.
That's what I said, wasn't it?
Specifically. Councilmember Bessinger.
Thank you. This is actually my favorite program that the district runs, because
Mine too.
I see this as the one that actually funnels money directly to folks who are sometimes in desperate need of getting a vehicle repaired or replaced. As a career law enforcement officer, I would stop cars that had expired registration, and these people are on the way to work, and it isn't registered for a year and a half, and they give you the look, I can't get it smogged. And on one hand, it's an unregistered car. On the other hand, these folks are headed to work. And as a law enforcement officer, I can tell you that even today, when I drive down the road, the car in front of me, I look at the license plate and the expiration. It's something I see. I was in Germany. I saw a car with California plates on it. And what didn't occur to me is, hey, that car has California plates in Germany. I noticed that it was expired. Just a very strange thing. In anticipation of this, because I like this program, I got a hold of some county and city mayors and councils just to let them know that we're going to be talking about this, especially in the more rural areas, because this is an equity program, and I really hate using that word, I'll be honest with you. But this funnels directly to folks who need it. If we can do some of this online, they can utilize county libraries, which have free web access. And one of the things I'd like to do is, once we get this, we had talked about working with law enforcement on this. And if these folks can have a piece of paper that says, I have an appointment to get my car looked at, you'd have to be a pretty hard-hearted law enforcement officer to not go, good luck to you. And this does 2 things for our region. In fact, this is probably throughout the state. It reduces pollution, which is one of our mandates, but it also helps the economy, because there are a lot of good folks who want to work, but they don't have the ability to get to work or get to school or get their kids to school or whatever else they need to do, because they can't afford a new car, and the one they got, they're having difficulty with. So I'm very happy with this program. I think it's the best program that we do. Thank you.
Great comments. Dr. Sheriff.
Thank you. Certainly echo all of those sentiments. An absolutely fabulous program, and well administered through the years and just gets better and better. I also think in terms of, if I remember in terms of the impact on emissions, it's actually one of our more cost-effective programs. And I just wanted to ask you to comment, if you could, specifically the value in terms of emission reductions that we get out of this.
Yeah, the program continues to be, very cost-effective when compared to other light-duty programs. Somewhere in the range of $40,000 to $60,000 a ton. We're going through a process right now to fully examine the results of kind of the implementation of the direct participation method and how that might have any impact on the cost effectiveness of the program. But it does compare very well to other light duty programs.
Well, and it's been mentioned, it's so critical in terms of the public outreach, getting the district out there, people more aware of what we're doing, and has been mentioned, reaching the effectiveness it's had of reaching rural and disadvantaged communities. It's been a terrific model. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Fugazi.
Yes, well, you all know how I feel about the program, and to Supervisor Wheeler's point, asking about Stockton, the one thing I would say, how do we get more repair shops involved in the program? Because that's the problem. They get their voucher or their number, and then they have to wait 2 or 3 months sometimes to get an appointment because these shops are so inundated with demand. And I will tell you, for example, Lodi doesn't have a single repair shop, but there are people in Lodi that would like to take advantage of the program, but they have to schedule an appointment in Stockton, and they have to drive to Stockton then and spend a day there, or have to be picked up or whatnot. So whatever we can do to increase the number of certified repair shops involved in the program, I think we need to explore that. Also, to the last point as well from Dr. Sheriffs is that this might be the only time members of the general public actually are involved with something with the Air Pollution Control District. And so, yes, telling them about our other programs, to trade out their fireplace or for their equipment for their lawns and gardens, all of our programs, being able to share that with them is so vital, which is why I definitely support both being able to call in to get a certificate as well as our in-person events. And, whatever we can do to continue funding to meet the demand, I think we need to do. So I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Peterson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have to say. First time I'm back to that, right? No, just curious, as an old farmer and you experience different things in production years when the weather changes, and I'm just curious. I know we have the executive director here, and I'm just curious of the experience, cost-wise, administration in the COVID model versus the delivery of the program in the non-COVID era, and how that occurred, and what were the experiences, and those kind of things when they present themselves. It's just a whole new way of doing things, and would just be curious to some comments about that.
Yeah, as Mr. Tom Knox is working his way up to the podium here, I think there definitely were some interesting learnings on that front, Supervisor, where some major efficiencies gained, but as well as, the need to really help walk, residents through the thought process for this, which is why it's so important to have that interaction with residents, because they really, it's not as simple as just, here you go, here's a voucher kind of a thing. There's actually a screening process that we go through, and that is a hand holding and a supportive process. So there's definitely efficiencies, and there's value that you get, say, from the weekend events that, do have there's overhead related to implementing it, for example, on the ground event that you may not have with a portal, but there's also some extra things that you have to do when you're not having that interaction there at the weekend event, through the portal process. So I'll leave it kind of at that high level there. And Tom, I don't know if you have any other observations or any other feedback you want to provide to the board as the key program partner who's really been so innovative in working with us to develop this program. So Tom.
Thanks so much. So board, thank you so much. This is my favorite 3 minutes of the year. It's great to be able to come in here and get this kind of recognition, and you guys make this possible. So thank you. I'll start by saying staff and management of the district has been so responsive to COVID. The speed with which they helped us adapt, and then it seemed totally reasonable 9 months ago that we would be through the worst of COVID at this point. And so, big thanks to management for coming back and recognizing we're still in it. We really still need to be able to give these services, as broadly and easily as possible. We hear on the phone every day, I'm hurting. I need to get to work. I just don't have the money for small repairs. What am I going to do? Thank goodness I can call. And then in answer to your question, Supervisor, I think we're looking at kind of a wholesale retail model on the phones versus events. We see a really, really steady number of calls every day on the phones. We can really estimate accurately in advance how many vouchers per day we'll give out via the phone. It's very efficient. It allows us to help a lot of people. The events, we're seeing folks that we think are not even comfortable picking up the phone, that really wouldn't access the services if they couldn't do it face to face. They couldn't, come and kind of explain their situation, feel the safety of not having to talk to someone unknown that they can't see. So I think we're definitely seeing the most challenged demographic at our events. It's harder and more expensive to stage an event. We get fewer people through, but I think the value of what we're doing at the events is greater. The real value of the events is too, we're doing COVID vaccinations, testing, food deliveries. There's all kinds of services we can offer. The great possibility is then the yard machine program, burn cleaner, things like that. So I think the events are going to get more and more efficient. We're really happy to reorient everything to the rural end of things this last 6 months. It didn't make sense to stage a huge event in a rural community in the past, when we knew we could always turn out 500 cars. It's tough to turn out 500 cars in a rural community, way off the 99 corridor. What we did is kind of shrink it down to about a third of the size. So it's really cost effective to do in all, we aimed at kind of the best target in each of the 8 counties this last 6 months. We saw a whole different response and it worked really well. So we're really encouraged now. So we kind of feel like we can do it all. We can do the rural communities, we can do big urban events, we can do phone banks, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. So there's really something for everyone there. And the consistency of the numbers, which really haven't changed in the last 12 months, really shows how valuable and needed this help is. So again, thank you for everything. This has been a really great experience for our team. And this is all thanks to the district management and staff. There's no one else that would enable this kind of program for this long with the freedom to just let us do what we need to do to help these customers. So thank you very much.
I guess with that experience, I was curious how your administrative fees, do they wash, over time? I mean, it's still kind of a same experience, exposure. Did you find different about that?
We've actually gotten a lot more efficient with overhead. Back when we were just running events, our overhead, which would be marketing, all the non-repair costs, totaled about 25% of the total budget. With this budget allocation, we're going to get that down to 20. So the more activity we're doing, the more efficient it's getting. And we're seeing all the other numbers are kind of rock steady in terms of the voucher redemption, very high, repair completion, the cost effectiveness, the kind of uniqueness of what we're getting is remaining constant. And we're seeing the overall efficiency of the program really increase.
think it's the other question is the shortage of vehicles. I know we also replace vehicles, and it's probably a pretty challenging time right now for that. And what's been the experience there as well?
That's our biggest challenge right now. You know, thanks to the district, we've taken care of the funding, we've taken care of all the other things. We've had the biggest response we've ever seen in the last 8 weeks of the year. We basically filled the pipeline for the year in about 8 weeks due to the demand that's just been out there growing for many, many years. Plus the vote by the board to change the model year to minimum 2006. We saw a huge explosion in interest in that. Yeah, and now we're up to this much more challenging problem, which is vehicle inventory. It's a problem everyone has, new and used right now. We've got some ideas, but this is a market problem. I think there's some solutions out there. We'll work with management staff to try and do that, to get as many cars as possible into the valley, clean, affordable cars.
Yeah, I'm just curious how to, and then, you know, if you look at that, and so we've got budgetary commitments for, you know, that vehicle replacement. And are there timelines associated with some of the funding that may present problems for us? You know, if we can't access that vehicle in the time allotted, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, just maybe my quick response. Tom, feel free to add more to it, but not yet. It's something we'll have to pay attention to. So on the vehicle replacement side, what we've been able to do is we took the locally developed and funded pilot that we worked together on several years ago, and that's become now the model for statewide program with state funding that actually goes towards the replacement stuff that we're talking about now. So we're actually due a major allocation here pretty soon on that state funding through the advocacy work because of the ramp up that we just talked about with the model year change. So there's a huge demand. There's a huge amount of state funding that's coming our way, and there is some latitude. It's a multi-year time frame, you know, associated with that funding, you know. But so it's something that we'll have to pay attention to. But we're not at that point of having any issues at this point. So I think we'll just work closely with Valley Can to make sure, you know, we and we report on that program on a really regular basis. So it's something that we'll continue to keep coming back to the board with. But because that is a state funded, and we're actually just getting that new state funding that's going to go toward that major ramp up here pretty soon. You know, we have a little bit of room to figure that out here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Knox. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Member Bissinger.
Just very quickly, to Vice Mayor Fugazi's point of the lack of facilities, I was wondering if we could each get a list of certified repair facilities in our jurisdictions and what the requirements are. And then I can reach out to my economic development staff, who can make contact with either people who can get in this because they're good to go, or people who might want to expand their existing test-only facility to something bigger. So if I can get that, I'll make sure that we put at least, you know, put it out there so that they can maybe develop their own economy.
Sure. We appreciate that. Yeah, I just want to say that this issue of that also Vice Mayor Fugazi brought up is something that's always on our radar, and something that Valley Can, our staff are always working on, trying to expand that list. So whatever you could do to support that process, we absolutely would appreciate that assistance. And we've noted down it's something that we're aware of up in the north, and that we continue looking for more options up there. You know, at some point the smog shop does have to want to participate, you know, and that's sometimes the challenge. You know, I mean, we do a lot of outreach and we talk to a lot of folks, you know, so whatever you can do to nudge, it's a win-win, really. I mean, for those that have taken advantage of this, I mean, it's really been a good economic, you know, boost for them. And so we'll continue, you know, working on that. Thank you for the support.
Thank you. I see no other comments from the board. Any public comments?
Let's see, just a few seconds on Zoom. Right now, I do not see an indication of public comments.
Okay, we have three staff recommendations. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bissinger?
Gladly, yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian,
Aye.
and Mr. Wheeler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very
Item
much.
number 8 is approved project plan for implementation of district's burn cleaner program within the Stockton AB 617 community.
Todd DeYoung works his way up here. Just wanted to quickly introduce him. He is the grants program director, and we'll be walking the board through this item. It's part of the major implementation work that's going on through the AB 617 program in the selected community of Stockton. This is just one of many examples of the work that's going on there to bring funding and resources into the community to help reduce air pollution. So we're excited to bring this item that came out of the plan that your board has adopted. And I'll turn it over to Todd to walk the board through the presentation.
Thank you,
And actually, I'm sorry, let me get the introductions done at one time here. It's actually a co-presentation. Todd's going to start the presentation, and then I'll have Jess Olson, who's our Director of Community Strategies and Resources, is going to also be presenting as part of this item. So I want to introduce her as well and just get that done here up front. Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members.
Thank you, Samir. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives. I am here this morning, or we are here this morning, seeking your approval of a project plan for the implementation of the district's burn cleaner program within the Stockton AB 617 community. So just by way of a very brief background, Stockton is one of 4 valley communities that's been prioritized by the district and subsequently selected by CARB as a community in the San Joaquin Valley to receive clean air resources available under AB 617. The other 3 communities being Shafter, South Central Fresno, and the Arvin-Lamont area. The board has adopted community emission reduction programs, or SERPs, for each one of these communities. And these SERPs include dedicated AB 617 funding for a variety of innovative measures aimed at reducing air pollution and exposure to harmful pollutants for these residents. These measures are developed and guided by the advice and knowledge of the local community members through their involvement in community steering committee processes in each one of the communities. The adopted community emission reduction programs, or SERPs, for Stockton included 31 emission and exposure reduction measures targeting almost 700 tons of NOx and 66 tons of direct PM 2.5. One of these measures will reduce direct PM 2.5 is to provide $300,000 in dedicated and increased funding for the replacement of wood burning devices with natural gas or electric heat pumps through the district's burn cleaner program. The district's burn cleaner program is an important part of our residential wood smoke reduction strategy because during the winter months, one of the largest sources of particulate pollution in the valley comes from residential wood burning. Residential wood smoke impacts valley neighborhoods directly where residents live and play. Residential wood smoke reduction strategy includes strong regulation coupled with incentives, outreach, and then enforcement of those regulations. The district's existing burn cleaner program incentives are currently offered to residents to replace existing wood burning devices with new natural gas or electric heat pumps. The burn cleaner program plays a key role in the success of the transition from these high polluting wood burning devices to cleaner devices by assisting to overcome the financial obstacles in purchasing these cleaner alternatives. This slide shows the demand and the success we've had in this program through the years, with a total of almost 26,000 vouchers issued and almost just over $47 million in total funding dedicated to the program. And so to utilize the state community air protection funding for these community identified projects, the district is required to submit project plans to CARB for approval. We have to do this in cases where the community identified project falls outside of the approved project categories under the community air protection funding. So there are certain project categories that are pre-approved under the CAP funding or community air protection funding. And for those projects that fall outside of those pre-approved project categories, we have to submit these project plans to the Air Resources Board for their approval. These plans outline things like the guidelines, the funding amounts, and then our emission reduction calculation methodologies. As outlined in the board-approved SERP, the proposed program would offer increased incentive amounts for residents in the Stockton AB 617 boundary. This includes up to $4,000 for an eligible electric heating source, such as an electric heat pump, and up to $3,000 to replace existing wood burning devices with natural gas. These amounts are consistent with the district's Burn Cleaner program as it's implemented in the district's hotspot counties. That includes Fresno, Madera, and Kern counties. So it's consistent with those incentive amounts in those counties. So the plan for the Burn Cleaner program was submitted to CARB in November of 2021. And since then, we have had ongoing engagement with the Community Steering Committee. We expect streamlined implementation of this program, given that this has already been implemented in other communities throughout the district and other AB 617 communities as well. We expect expedited CARB approval of the plan because we've already submitted this plan in other communities. So they're currently reviewing that plan, and we expect expedited approval within the coming days or weeks. Our plan is to immediately open this program upon approval from CARB so that we can take advantage of this wintertime burn season when a lot of folks are thinking about replacing their higher polluting wood burning devices. So we'd like to get this out immediately upon CARB adoption of that plan. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Jessica Olson to talk about some of the other initiatives going on in Stockton.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jessica Olson, Director of Community Strategies and Resources. And I'm just going to take a few slides here to just kind of talk more broadly about Stockton's ongoing implementation process for AB 617. So next slide. Since your board adopted the SERP and subsequent approval by CARB in July of just last year, district staff has worked really closely with the Stockton Community Steering Committee to continue to meet regularly to implement the numerous emissions and exposure reduction strategies that Todd outlined earlier. So immediately upon adoption, your board's adoption even, so earlier in 2021, we worked with the CSC very closely to prioritize all of the different SERP measures and then organize certain SERP measures, not all of them, but many of them into subcommittees to help streamline implementation process and really get community members very involved, kind of to focus discussions on particular measures. So you can see here in this table below, these are outlining the multiple community-led and co-led subcommittees that were identified for high priority items. And several of these committees, and many of them actually have already begun to meet on a regular basis. Several of them have already identified co-leads and are working very closely with district staff and other implementation partners on all of these meetings. One example is just that first one, vegetative barriers and urban greening, has already met several times and has really been just a great sort of template for working with the community on a co-lead model and really getting residents and community members involved in implementation. Just really a brief outline of what those subcommittee meetings are. They, of course, include the CSC members, but also district and CARB staff. We have technical experts. Several of these different measures are rather technical, and maybe they're new to us even as a district to implement. So getting expert advice is very key to implementation. And then, of course, potential implementation partners. Many of these, or almost all of them, are incentives measures. So we need people to take advantage of voluntary incentives, and we bring them to the table to help us develop next steps for project implementation. So the district regularly shares implementation progress, seeks feedback from community members, develop the incentives funding project plans as described by Todd earlier if they are required. And then, of course, working closely with the CSC on identifying outreach opportunities, really getting to know what specific outreach opportunities for their community might work best. And then, of course, accessibility and transparency are really vital to this program overall. So here on the right, you can just see our Stockton-specific community webpage has outlined all of the different subcommittees. You can click on any one of those subcommittee pages and see agendas, recent meetings, notes, any other sort of recent materials or presentations that are, people might want to look at to understand sort of where the process is at for each of these. And then, of course, as I described earlier, and with the number of measures that we do have in the SERP, not all of the measures are needed or implemented rather in subcommittees. Several of them we've just been working with the CSC to directly just update the CSC on during our monthly meetings, not only just on project plan development, if that is required, but also just on measure implementation. So for incentives measures, as Todd described, there are some that need project plan approval from CARB. So of course, one being the recent wood burning fireplaces or burn cleaner program. That was really what this item is about. But then also another recent one was incentives for EV charging, which we actually just got approved by CARB yesterday. So definitely a lot of process happening outside of subcommittees, and we're moving a lot of these measures forward. And then of course, as mentioned earlier, measures like replacement for locomotive switchers and school buses, those are already pre-approved by CARB if they're already sort of like in state funding guidelines. So we have already been working with partners to fund these types of projects and move those forward as well. And then of course, there's plenty of measures that aren't incentives. They're regulatory measures, enforcement measures, outreach measures. So we've been working just, of course, to keep the committee updated and get a lot of feedback on those as well. And then again, just sort of in transparency and helping folks kind of be plugged in, maybe if they can't see a recent meeting or attend any meetings, we have a monthly tracker that's located on our website that actually outlines measure by measure how all of the implementation processes are going. So next steps for today, approval of today's item would authorize the district to launch the Burn Cleaner program with the Stockton AB 617 community immediately upon CARB approval of that project plan described earlier. The district will work closely with the Community Steering Committee to begin targeted outreach for the program for the residents of the boundary. And today's action will authorize the Executive Director, APCO, to make administrative changes to the adopted SERP as necessary to ensure successful implementation of the program. So with that, we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Jessica, on the outreach, the subcommittee meetings, are you seeing good participation in these COVID times, or is it difficult to get people to participate?
Absolutely. So actually for Stockton, we have met more in COVID than not. So Stockton was really launched, and I see Vice Mayor Fugazi clapping there. Stockton was launched pretty like 2 months before I think we had to shut down. So Stockton is really well versed in sort of all of these virtual meetings. And I'd actually say, you know, in terms of accessibility for all of the, since we have so many subcommittee meetings, I'm seeing, if anything, maybe more participation than maybe if we had to meet in person. I'm not even certain that we would have as many subcommittees or opportunities for subcommittees without.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Peterson.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a more general question, not specific to this item, but specific to AB 617. I know that in our last updates, there was a lack of funding for AB 617. I think moving forward, they hadn't really identified specific money. Has that changed any in the latest budget projections? And you know, seems to be money running out of every orifice and Sacramento.
Great question. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more in the context of the ledge platform as well, with the budget priorities and an update on kind of where the governor's budget is for this year. But there has been money. So the current budget that was adopted by the state late last year, there is money in the budget, both for implementation as well as for community air protection funds. And there's actually some new funding in there as well to support some additional community focused work, not through the district, but working with NGOs. So that's actually in the current budget. In the new budget that was proposed just recently here by the governor, there's funding once again for both implementation and for the incentive programs. Where that lands, that's going to play out here this year as the budget continues to be discussed. But that funding has been, it's at the same level as well. So in the current budget and in the proposed budget, so it continues to be there. But every year, you know, we continue to have to advocate for it, and that's something that we try to figure out a way to make that a more continuous stream, so we don't have to kind of be in that same place. But fortunately, there is some funding. But you know, if there was more, I think that would be helpful as well. So we continue to advocate for that as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Fugazi.
Thank you. I just want to say that this really has been an empowering process for residents in the service area of AB 617 in Stockton, and how much I've heard from them, the members, in terms of these subcommittees, just being able to say that they are part of the process in making positive changes in their community. And I would say that moving forward, if your community gets selected, I mean, really taking that opportunity, I thank you, staff, for working with our residents in Stockton, and I thank our members in Stockton regularly as well, because this is what they believe is going to create the change that we need. And they are the best promoters of then this program because they are talking to others about it. And I'm very hopeful over the future and the measures that are coming to us now and down the road. So thank you to everybody involved in helping us in Stockton.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for those comments on the ground, as it were, from Stockton up to the moment. And I'm just reminded in the presentation of how complex this whole process is. And again, just salute the district staff for their ability to be adaptable, innovative, to coordinate, to collaborate with a very diverse community, with local agencies, governmental agencies, CARB and other state agencies. It's an incredibly complex process, and it's very gratifying that the district has been able to do so well with all of the communities and off to such a great start with Stockton.
Thank you. I see no other comments from board members. Anyone online?
Open it up to public comment. Or do we have any public comment in the central office? Doesn't look like it. And I do not see any public. Oh, wait, 1 second. Yes, we do. Mr. Kevin Hamilton.
Morning, Kevin.
I was going to say, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just again now. Hi, good morning. Kevin Hamilton, Co-Director, Central California Asthma Collaborative. I just wanted to comment on just what a great thing the board is doing and participating so actively in AB 617. We've had our bumps along the road, but it is indeed a road. The road is built and things are riding back and forth on it. Business is happening. Commerce is being conducted. So we've been feeling really good about it here over the last 3 or 4 months. The challenge of COVID was met and risen to, and again, the resources put on the table. I heard Samir loud and clear on the budget. I think we all feel the same way. And I think I've said about just about everything the state funds, that if I had a little bit more money and didn't have to fight for it quite so hard, it sure would be easier. But with regard to this, and especially in Stockton, I think the participation there has been incredible. I've been in meetings where there's as many as 114, 125 people there. And so this virtual world that we've been put in, while not the best of all things in this particular area and getting people to participate in their democracy, actively participate, I just have never seen anything like it. So hopefully we see this kind of option for folks to participate moving on into the future. But for now, I have to say it's just been a real pleasure. So, and again, thanking the district for moving so smartly through this and for really reaching out and working with the community residents and advocates in the community to try to smooth as many of those bumps as we can. There'll be others along the road. There's no doubt about that, because this is a very difficult road we're climbing. It's all a brave new world, as Aldous Huxley said. But I think we're all looking forward to meeting it. So thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you much.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item. And I also see that Mayor Pro Tem Deborah Lewis has joined us.
Perfect. All right. So
move approval.
Second.
Dr. Sheriff.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a second of Vice Mayor Fugazi's motion. I second Vice Mayor Fugazi's motion.
All right. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
I'll vote yes, even though I got in half of it.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Ms. Dr. Sheriff?
Okay.
Ms. Schicklin,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is approve the district's 2022 legislative platform.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'd like to introduce Tom Jordan, who's the district's senior policy advisor, who's going to walk us through this year's legislative platform and all of the various opportunities that we see in advocating for programs and priorities that fulfill the district's mission. I think to state that there is a lot of activity going on would be a gross understatement of what is happening particularly at the state level, but also on the federal level. So we're excited to talk about it. It's always a great opportunity to discuss, how we can take advantage of these different opportunities in the coming year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom to walk us through the presentation.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So I'm going to go through some of the reasons we actually advocate on issues and go through our policy priorities. And then I'm also going to have input from our advocates at the state and federal level at that point. And then we can go further into questions as they come up. So in cleaning the air in the San Joaquin Valley, the district is the local agency that is in charge of putting together a plan for the valley. But we don't have all the authority to get all the emission reductions we need to reach attainment. The district's primary area of authority is the regulation of stationary sources. And then on the mobile source side, we operate incentive programs that has local funding, state funding, and federal funding to actually provide people incentives to turn over their equipment with cleaner equipment. At the federal level, EPA sets the standards, the national standards for clean air, and they're charged with interstate commerce issues. So they're in charge of controlling emissions from trucks, trains, planes, boats, and then they're also in charge of approving the plans to come in compliance with the federal standards and providing oversight to agencies that do so. The state of California has some unique authority under the Federal Clean Air Act, and that they also are able to develop programs and regulations for mobile sources that can be applicable in California and in other states. So other states basically have an option of going with the federal program or the California program. So we're a little bit unique in that area. And then also we work with county and city governments on land use planning issues, our transportation planning agencies and others on transit and transportation planning, as those issues also impact air quality. So as you can see, there are a lot of people that are involved in our activities. So this provides basically the need for a strong advocacy program. The district, has been at this for a number of decades. Stationary sources, which we control, the emissions of NOx, which is the main precursor for both ozone and PM 2.5, have been reduced by over 90%. Through our incentive programs, both public-private investment is over $4 billion, which is quite amazing, and that's really happened primarily over the last 5 to 10 years. But the remaining emissions from mobile sources, we need help from both the state and federal government to continue to see emission reductions from those categories. So at the beginning of each year, we come to your board and we have a list of policy principles that kind of guide our activities as we advocate throughout the year at both the state and federal level. So this year, the policy priorities, the first one is a general priority of basically looking for funding for clean air projects at both the state and federal level. This is kind of a catch-all. Wherever we can find money, we look for it. So, be that cap and trade at the state level, budget surplus dollars at the state level, transportation dollars, anywhere we can find it, we look for funding. And so this is kind of a general category for that. Also, a very active area right now is greenhouse gas reduction. So as the state and federal government develop policies for greenhouse gas reduction measures, we try to advocate for those projects that also get reductions in criteria pollutants, so things like ozone and PM and toxic emissions, and try to get the state and federal government to prioritize those measures. And then also, this year in particular, there are a number of climate initiatives at both the state and federal level that we're engaged on both funding wise and as far as policies go. At the state level, the state's in the middle of developing their scoping plan that will guide their greenhouse reduction measures going forward. The state budget is heavily focused on greenhouse gases, and there's a significant overlap with, as I mentioned before, with criteria and toxic emissions. At the federal level, both the infrastructure bill and then the budget reconciliation process that is, kind of still working its way around, have a big focus on greenhouse gases. And the farm bill that's probably going to be developed over the coming year, sustainable agriculture, that's a big issue both at the state and federal level. And so we look for opportunities in all those processes to move our policies forward to help us meet clean air goals. As Supervisor Peterson mentioned earlier, funding for 617 is a big issue at the state level. We have been able to maintain funding over the years, but it's been a fight every year. And this year is really no different. So we've continued to look for sustainable funding that isn't relying on the whims of the current administration or the legislature and their priorities on a year-to-year basis. The Clean Air Act has been around for a long time. We've talked about it a lot with your board, and we, as an area with significant air quality challenges, tend to find the wrinkles in the act that cause challenges. So we continue to work with EPA and others at the federal level to make sure that we're finding streamlined and efficient ways to implement the act. One of the big issues that we're dealing with right now is there's been recent court cases dealing with contingency measures. And for a region like ours that has to do all measures available, holding something in reserve for contingency is a challenge. And EPA is currently going through a process based upon those court rulings to try to find a way forward for everybody, including a region like ours, to meet those requirements. So that's a very important issue right now that we're dealing with. Also at the federal level, they're dealing with motor vehicle emission standards. Right now they're dealing with emission standards for heavy duty equipment. And for us to meet our air quality challenges, it requires action from both the state and federal government on those sources under their control. So we continue to advocate for national standards that will help us to meet our required attainment standards. The promotion of the development and deployment of near zero and zero emission vehicle technologies. Basically, our position is where zero is available and it works. We're all for deploying zero emission vehicles where it's cost effective and it can meet the duty cycles. But where it can't, we're all for deploying the cleanest technology available. One big example is for long haul trucking, where right now zero isn't quite there yet, but there's natural gas vehicles that are 90% cleaner than traditional vehicles that we'd like to see deployed now. And we can't just wait for the perfect. We need to continue to make progress. So where those zero emissions there, we'll deploy it. Where not, we'll deploy the cleanest technologies available. One of our largest local funding source is the Carl Moyer program and other D&B fees that we use on a local level to obtain emission reductions. These programs are set to expire, one at the end of 2023 and one in the middle of 2024. So we've been working with stakeholders and others throughout the state on trying to reauthorize those programs, and that will continue this year. There are a lot of challenges this year, just given redistricting and what's going on, but we continue to talk about the issue and look for a path forward to reauthorize those fees, whether it be this year or next, but we're going to continue that effort to see if there's a pathway forward. Over the last year, you all have been involved in the discussion about phasing out agricultural burning. We were fortunate enough to receive some significant state funding to help with that effort, but we see a number of opportunities through biomass, innovative new biomass facilities, and continue to provide more funding to help phase out the burning of agricultural waste. The state level, obviously, but as I mentioned, up in the upcoming year, the discussions about the Farm Bill will continue, and that's another opportunity to see if we can find some additional incentives to help to look for alternatives to burning that material in the field. One of the things, being an extreme non-attainment area, we continue to look at technology advancement to find additional ways to reduce emissions. So we continue to look for funding both at the state and federal level to help push those technologies forward, and to develop, like as I mentioned in biomass, other alternatives that are cleaner than what we have available to us today. And then the final policy would be dealing with wildfire. There's been substantial movement in this area, which is good news, but we are all for working with all our land management partners on ways to better manage our forest, be it through prescribed fire, mechanical treatment, all the different alternatives to avoid the catastrophic wildfires and their air quality impacts that we've dealt with in recent years. There's been some significant funding at both the state and federal level, and so now a lot of it is working with those land managers to make sure they're expeditiously implementing the programs that have been authorized and been funded moving forward. So at the federal level, there's a number of important programs and areas that we look for resources. EPA obviously is one of our major partners there. The DERA program has been plussed up in the recent years. We continue to look at getting as much funding to that as we can. The Targeted Airship program, which is very similar to DERA, but it actually was created by us years ago as an earmark and has transitioned into a program that's grown quite a bit, which targets funding to air quality areas that have the worst challenges like ours. We do very well through that program. Also, the recent budget discussions, there's significant funding through the 103 and 105 grants, which allow us to continue to do for staffing work and for other things that are very important. The recently passed infrastructure bill has a lot of opportunities. Some of them touch us, some of them are working with our partners, the transportation agencies and others, to make sure we're taking full advantages of those programs. There's significant funding for charging infrastructure, for alternative fuel infrastructure, clean transit vehicles, clean school buses. So we want to work with everybody we can to make sure we're taking full opportunity of those. And then as the budget reconciliation process moves forward in whatever format it does, we look for opportunities there as well. I mentioned that it's time for a new farm bill. The Valley does receive a fair amount of funding through the farm bill to help deal with our air quality issues. We've been a real innovator in that, and we'll continue to look for opportunities to support those programs that are already there, and then also deal with some of our issues like ag burning, and look for funding opportunities there. With EPA, it continues to be a discussion to, it's a relatively new administration, to educate them on our challenges. We are one of those regions that has some of the most significant challenges, and it's difficult to work through. So we need EPA to understand those challenges and to come up with innovative ways to deal with them. Recently, there's been some action on EPA to begin approving some of our attainment plans that they've had for a while. There's still some outstanding approvals we need, so we continue to work on those. Exceptional events due to wildfires and other issues, EPA can flag those events, but there's a lengthy process to go through, and so we're working with them through that. And with all the attainment plans and issues we deal with, trying to streamline that process as much as possible is always important. And resources again to help with all that work. The COVID environment has still made things challenging, so we're still dealing with virtual issues. Hopefully, maybe this will be the year we get to go back to DC. So we'll see, and we continue to talk to folks back there and see when that will be possible. At the state level, there really is, I mean, the budget issues have been huge the last few years. Fortunately, we have done well, but it's been quite a process, and I think I described it once before that the budget at the state level used to be a middle distance event. Now it's become a full-on marathon. It seems like it's budget all year long, and but it's worth it because we have done well. A few of the highlights of the governor's most recently released budget on the air quality front. The farmer program, last year there was a 2-year commitment for farmer. The first year was 208 million. It was just over 200 million. I'm not sure, I can't recall their exact number right now. But they committed to a second year of funding, 150 million. That funding is to replace agricultural equipment with cleaner equipment. Even though that was a 2-year commitment, I still don't think we take this as our final answer. There's a number of categories where they've plussed up those second years of commitment, but in the governor's initial proposal, he has met that commitment from last year of $150 million. For 617 implementation, they included $50 million, which is good that it was included. However, they added 2 new communities last year, and this is the funding amount has been stagnant for each of the years. And as we've already discussed, it's a discretionary pot every year. So if the program is going to continue at the level that people expect of it, we feel like there needs to be a dedicated funding source for that so we can plan for it and meet people's expectations. On the incentive side, for 617, it's $180 million this year. Last year it was $260 million. So this is actually a cut from last year. So we've been in discussions with others around the state to see if we can work to plus that back up again. There's $85 million statewide for the Healthy Soils program. This is an increase from past amounts. One of the things I've heard about this category is with the groundwater issues and the potential for more fallowed land. They're looking at this as a funding source to deal with some of those issues. So we continue to be aware of those opportunities and make sure that the valley is positioned to take advantage when they can. Out of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the food processors, there's an incentive program, $85 million for them for basically energy efficiency work at their facilities. They've received funding in the past years, and it was nice to see that commitment still there. The Clean Cars for All program, which you just discussed, there was a multi-year funding commitment last year, and an additional $256 million, which is a multi-year commitment to that program, was made this year. There is a desire to bring this from a relatively few number of air districts to a statewide program. But I think we're well positioned to take advantage of that given the cutting edge nature of our program, the challenges the Valley faces, and just our performance over time. So we're trying to make sure that we get the maximum amount of that pot as we can. And then the biggest category, which is it adds to a multi-year commitment from last year, is $6 billion for zero emission vehicles and equipment. This is a big multi-year commitment. You know, I think one of the challenges we're going to see with this category is, especially in the heavy duty side, making sure the equipment is actually there and ready to roll for these pots. But this is an expansive pot that goes across all categories, everything from buses, medium-sized trucks to heavy-duty trucks, but it's a substantial commitment by the state. So as the budget goes through the process, we will, obviously be very involved. Sylvia Solis-Shaw is going to talk probably a little bit about this, but we see the process being a little bit accelerated this year. So that advocacy will begin in earnest. We've already been involved, but over the next month, there's going to be a lot of activity. And with that, I would like to turn it over. I think we'll start at the state level with Sylvia Solis-Shaw with Shaw, Yoder, Antweet, Schmelzer, and Lang. Believe it or not, I did memorize that. I didn't use her background, but Sylvia, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Thank you, Tom. Sylvia Solis-Shaw, my colleague Paul Yoder, and I have been proud to represent the district for over a decade. and I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak this morning. As Mr. Jordan indicated earlier, there are significant levels of funding in the state budget for air districts in the current budget year. Just very quickly touching on those again, 170 million for farmer program, 180 million for alternatives to agricultural burning, 260 million statewide for AB 617, including the 50 million for local implementation, and 150 million for transportation equity plans, including the Clean Cars for All program. Our firm will work closely with Mr. Jordan, sorry, and your executive officer to continue to bring additional incentive funding to the Valley in the next budget year, as the state continues to see record revenues coming into the state coffers. Speaking on the budget, on January 10th, Governor Newsom released his proposed fiscal year 22-23 budget. It is enormous, $286.4 billion budget. It highlights several of the administration's priorities, and the governor emphasized the following: the COVID-19 pandemic and the state's response to it, as well as funding for homelessness, combating climate change, wildfires and emergency response, and as well as drought resilience and drought response. Governor Newsom is proposing to build state reserves of $34.6 billion and indicated that the state will have a $45.7 billion surplus. However, please keep in mind that after Prop 98 and commitments that are being made to fill the CalPERS retirement commitments, the governor indicated that this will leave approximately $20.6 billion in discretionary resources to be allocated. I think it's also important to note that we should expect some of these numbers, including the discretionary resources available, to change after the May revision to the budget, as a significant portion of the state's revenues come in during the latter part of the fiscal year, right before and right after the April tax filing deadline. In addition, Tom had mentioned the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is an important funding source for our programs. There will be 2 additional cap and trade auctions before the budget is finalized in June, and this should also increase available funding for our programs once we go through the budget process. As of now, the only budget issue that has been flagged for early action, meaning in the next couple of weeks, is the governor's COVID-19 emergency response package. The governor has identified that as a priority to keep up with testing demand and to increase vaccination rates. The administration is requesting early action to allocate an additional $1.4 billion required to continue these efforts for the remainder of the fiscal year. I would also highlight that it is contemplated that this will include an extension of a supplemental paid sick leave that had expired last year. So these budget discussions all come in the midst of whirlwind changes that the legislature is dealing with. So just to focus on a couple of bigger picture items, redistricting maps were finalized in late December, and this has led to a flurry of legislators announcing that they are moving to a new district or running for congressional seats, county boards, or just simply that they will announcing that they will not be running for re-election. Every day seems to bring a new announcement along these lines, and we should expect this to continue throughout the next month and before the filing deadlines. This also coincides with 4 current vacancies in the Assembly, with special elections for those seats scheduled this spring. In addition, there have been a number of committee chairs that have changed in both the Senate and the Assembly, and the legislature has also physically been displaced in that this fall Capitol offices have moved out of the large annex portion of the Capitol, which will be demolished and rebuilt. But in the meantime, those offices are now being housed in a new building a block away from the Capitol. So as you can see, there's a unique and challenging legislative session ahead. Going back a little bit to the budget, due to space and time constraints, we do expect to see budget subcommittee deliberations beginning in February, not just on the items identified for early action being the COVID response package, but as well as just the first run through of all of the budget items. And so once we will work with Tom and others on making sure that we communicate our budget priorities to our legislators and to legislators who are part of our delegation, as well as the relevant budget subcommittee chairs and members. So I think that's it. And please let me know if you have any questions. And thank you so much for your time.
All right, and now if I could introduce Lynn Jaquez, who you're all probably very familiar with over the years with CJ Lake, who represents us back in DC, and she can give an update and then we can go to questions from there.
Thank you so much, Tom, and members of the board. Very, very pleased to see you. Wish I could be there, but soon, very soon, right? So happy to give just a little bit of a rundown over the activities over the past year, and then a little bit of prognostication, I would say, about the coming year in line with Tom's presentation. And I think as I presented to you all last year at the beginning of the new administration, that, you know, personnel is policy. And so after our first year of a new administration, we are still painstakingly delivering and defining who that personnel is going to be in this administration. Although we have all of the 22 cabinet and sub-cabinet level and cabinet type personnel appointed, the underlying positions, of which there are about 800 to 900 that require Senate confirmation, are moving very, very slowly. From our perspective, obviously, we have our EPA administrator, we have the USDA secretary, we have rural development, and we have now a nominee for Region 9 administrator, which should be all well familiar to you, but it is somewhat of a slow going process. In addition, a flurry of activity in the new administration on climate and climate related regulatory and executive actions. Since we last met personally, in giving this update, there have been a total of 11 executive orders, 2 of which were on climate and climate related activity, 2 of which were issued in the very first week of the administration, which led to close to 100 internal agency regulatory procedures, policies, and memorandum, and that continues. So staying on top of those kinds of things, particularly the ones that we focus on regarding regulation of our medium and heavy duty vehicle NOx standards, and the engagement of our delegation on our behalf to really urge EPA to finalize those and help us with our significant challenges in that sector, which only they can do. And then obviously, it has been all things COVID from the administration's perspective in every cabinet meeting and in every policy discussion that takes place. The director of the COVID-19 task force just about has the ultimate say in shaping a lot of these priorities. I will say, moving to Congress, we had a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, the ARP, that passed in March. We had a $1.2 billion bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed in November. And then the House passed the $2.2 trillion Build Back Better program also in November. So my calculator has run out of zeros, I must say, as I try to add these things up. But it's a lot that is definitely going out the door. And as Tom indicated, we are looking for every single dollar and multiple zeros behind those dollars that can come to the district and our partners in order to address our significant challenges. We had a hiccup, if you will, as you well know from the headlines on the Build Back Better program, which contains some of the additional climate actions that were not included in the infrastructure bill. But we have indications that it's very likely that those provisions in particular will be separated out from the social spending measures and might be attempted to be passed in individual chunks, if you will, standalones, and that has surfaced just this last week as a possible priority. So the unfinished business from last year, and one in which we focused a great deal of your time and effort. Thank you very much for everybody that participated in our June virtual fly-ins, was on the specific federal appropriations and budget program requests that Tom has outlined. And we are particularly pleased by the growth and expansion in federal funding for the targeted airshed program, of which we received the largest grant in program history. And as Tom indicated, we started that from a very tiny little $5 million pot. The FY21 enacted was $59 million. The budget request for FY22 was $59 million. The House and neither House nor Senate and Congress has finalized the FY22 appropriations package. The current deadline for the continuing resolution is February 18th. And we hope that they giddy on up and complete this, because we've got FY23, we're already in play. But the House has approved $70 million for the targeted airshed program, and the Senate maintained the budget request of $59 million, which is still a significant increase. There's also some funding for monitoring equipment, and as Tom pointed out, some of our basic staffing, Section 103, 105 grant types of programs. For the diesel emissions reduction program, which is another area that we advocate quite strongly on, the FY21 budget request went from a $60 million enacted level for FY21 for FY22 to $150 million. The House appropriated $150 million for it in its bill, and the Senate included $142 million, a huge increase in that program. Whether and how much survives the conference and potential omnibus remains to be seen. The other area, as Tom indicated, that we were focusing on and continue to focus on is in the wildfire prevention, smoke preparedness, anything from that, from those natural disaster activities that impact our attainment and our challenges. And EPA established a new $10 million program, the House did in its bill, that would specifically help districts like ours deal with smoke preparedness and the air quality challenges that come from that. So I will have hopefully more to report before the end of February as far as wrapping up FY22. FY23 budget, as you may well remember, is usually sent over from the administration the first week of February. That is not going to happen. And the timing, is still somewhat up in the air, but we do anticipate that they might send that over shortly after, the week following the currently scheduled March 1st State of the Union address. So everything is pushed back a little bit this year, but we are hopeful that will come shortly over, and that will kick off, obviously, the appropriations process for this year. And as Tom indicated, in the Farm Bill that actually will expire next year, they are beginning the reauthorization and drafting of that this year. And we will be focusing on technologies for sustainable agriculture, which will help reduce that sector's contributions and relieve some of the mandatory restrictions that may be coming on them, as well as a lot of the wildfire prevention, preparedness activities, and particularly ag burning technologies and solutions to that. As Sylvia was describing, the political environment for the coming year at the federal level is equally as interesting as it is at the state level. We are down to only one vacancy right now in the House of Representatives. The majority is 222 to 212, with one vacancy in the Valley due to Congressman Nunes's resignation. And we have the enduring 50-50 split in the Senate still remaining. We are in the throes of the redistricting at the congressional level. Obviously, about 56% of the nation's congressional districts have been determined thus far, which is which is not a great amount, quite frankly, as we begin the midterm primaries in March. So a lot of moving pieces at the federal level, the same as there is at the state level, with members deciding not to run for re-election or shifting districts, as we saw this past week with some retirements. And so stay tuned for that and the impact in our Valley delegation in particular. And so I really think that the other sort of overarching issue that occurred this past year and may bleed over into this year for us is the resurgence, I guess, or reemergence, I would say, of congressionally directed spending, or as we affectionately refer to them as earmarks. The House and Senate both put a process in last year for project submission, individual project submission. And while none of the bills that finally made it through have included projects yet, we still need to see what's going to happen in the appropriations process. We expect that will continue this coming year, and our organization may want to design a project or two. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions, not comments, any questions of either Lynn or Sylvia?
Actually, I do.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. Just in regards to federal money that's going to be potentially earmarked towards wildfires, I was part of a 2019 Fresno COG One Voice tour, and we brought up to everybody we met, we talked about a group that was touting a forest management training for loggers and fellers. We explained to everybody that would listen, we talked to them about the millions of trees that were diseased and dead. And to say that the response was mild would probably be an understatement. And I kind of wondered how they felt the next year when the Creek Fire and all the other devastating fires hit us. And the fact that most of the fire were on state and federal lands or with utility right-of-ways. Is there any, or is, I guess, whenever we have a possibility to have that conversation about removing some of the fuel from the forests that can be, especially, I mean, granted, with loggers and fellers, to get them into the backcountry is going to be difficult, but the populated forest communities that are adjacent to a lot of these dying areas, I mean, you had people who lost their homes. They had to make a choice. Hey, am I going to repair this, or am I going to just walk away? The economic effects in the cities, the cost to government to send people our firefighters in Clovis were, we had a lot of people who were consistently gone for a period of 6 months. I mean, we get reimbursed for it, but it's not monopoly money. Somebody's got to pay that later. And, obviously the environmental benefits would be enormous. And we're also creating jobs that people will be able to, make good money doing. And especially in our rural communities, our mountain communities, this takes people who don't have to come to the big city to work. They can work by their home. They can work, if they get trained, they can work for PG&E maybe. But loggers and fellers as a profession kind of reduced with the amount of timber that we could no longer harvest. So I would hope that given an opportunity, whenever somebody's brainstorming, gee, what can we do that won't cost lots of money and be good economically? Loggers and fellers training would be something that I'd want to, bring into the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Supervisor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Drew. That kind of fits in what I was going to say. The training of loggers and fellers and the whole work don't do any good when you haven't got no sawmills. When you spoke, Tom and Lynn, when you were speaking, nice seeing you, Lynn, on Zoom better than, I guess, not being back there.
Come
You guys,
on
neither
out,
one of
sir,
you mentioned,
please. Come on out.
yeah. Neither one of you mentioned sawmills, you know, just the one creek fire alone, all the millions they spent on that would fund many sawmills. We used to have 120 plus sawmills in California. We've got around 22 right now, and we cannot manage our forest without sawmills or biomass plants, whatever. Almost all the sawmills in those days had a biomass plant there, and just like North Fork and Albury and everything around here. So when we just go talk about forest health without sawmills, it's not going to happen, period. We can train all the people in the world, but we got no place to put them and cut them up, which is the most renewable resource that we have. And all that fuel overload that we have now has been created for the last 30 years that we haven't had no damn sawmills. That's just the bottom line. And I lived it. I've seen it and I've done it all. So thank you.
I will just, sort of echo the, I think, increasing attention that is being paid in the biomass area with incentives and other kinds of mechanisms to increase, that renewable and source of production. And there have been several pieces of legislation, Supervisor, that's seeking to expand that. So we'll definitely keep you posted on that. And then, as part of our virtual discussions or hopefully in-person discussions, I will note that the U.S. Conference of Mayors held their conference this past week in DC, and we are expecting NACO to take place in March. So fingers crossed that the campus, if you will reopen completely. But anyway, very much noted, and we'll definitely pay attention to that.
Perfect. Okay, so if there's no other board member that wants to ask questions, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to just go back to the regular comment period. I just want to say that good policy directs our legislative platform. And I've been a firm believer for many years. If there's a dollar out there to be had, I would just as soon it was spent in the San Joaquin Valley. And so sometimes our policies have to morph depending on how the funding situations. They are imperfect documents, but they're perfect for the time. And again, they're living, breathing documents. So what I'm going to do is ask if there's any other comments, or else I'm going to go to public comment. Dr. Pacheco-Warner, I see you joined us.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. Just wanted to really commend Tom, his team, Samir, for the leadership on really targeting these set of fundings, identifying these set of fundings that you'll be going after in this next year. And I think particularly, being on the table, at the table versus on the menu in terms of the zero emission transition is really key. And especially for our rural communities, which is something that I know I'll continue to help the district advocate for, as well as just so many of the model programs that you have on ag equipment and vehicles for our low-income communities. I think that that's really crucial. And as the Vice Chair said, this is great that you're being really responsive to the times that we're in right now, and taking advantage of what is out there. And I know that you'll make good use of it, and especially as we think about the 617 communities and the programs they continue to identify as needed in their communities, as we did with the vote earlier today, that we can use these incoming monies for that responsiveness, not just to 617 communities, but to all of our communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And now we'll go to public comment.
This looks like we do have public comment. Ms. Connie Young?
Yeah, hello, this is Connie Young again. I really appreciate your acknowledgement of the potential impacts that changing climate conditions could have on local air quality, and the recognition of the co-benefits of reducing criteria pollutants and greenhouse gases. I know I sound like a broken record, but while all of these local initiatives are necessary and important, I would also recommend that you add to your legislative priorities the passage of a national price on carbon emissions with revenues returned to U.S. households and a carbon border adjustment. Simply put, if we want less of something, in this case, carbon emissions, we need to make them more expensive. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next is John Larea. It looks like he just took his hand down.
Okay.
Oh, no, he did. He's there. Mr. Larea?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. John Larea with the California League of Food Producers, representing the large industrial food processors operating in the Valley. I wanted to thank the board and the staff for including the Food Production Investment Program, or FPIP, in its 2022 legislative priorities. This successful program will allow large food processors to continue to reduce emissions and contribute to the overall success of the district's emissions reductions efforts. Back in 2019, CARB recognized that the food processing industry will be one of those hard to convert sectors, being as it is primarily thermal and unsuitable for decarbonization through electrification due to the excessive costs, lack of affordable technologies, and other energy infrastructure barriers. Looking forward for the food processing industry to continue to maximize its contributions to the district's emissions reductions efforts, it's encouraging that staff recognizes that programs like FPIP will be key. This recommendation recognizes that factors like seasonality and return on investment will continue to be hindrances to the food processor's ability to obtain cost-effective technologies. But programs like FPIP help bridge that gap by giving food processors access to new clean technologies in spite of those barriers that are a natural part of food processing. So again, the League of Food Producers thanks the staff for its recommendation and urges the board to approve agenda item 10. Thank you.
Janet Dietz-Kamay?
Thank you. Now, I've heard some good things in this presentation and funding going to good areas, but I am beyond disappointed. I am disgusted at the push for biomass plants. We are trying to bring down greenhouse gases, and introducing black carbon through biomass plants is not an answer. We have a biomass plant right here that is near 2 elementary schools. They're right there, breathing the air from the biomass plant. It is not an answer. If we want to bring down the PM 2.5, the black carbon, and the pollutants that contribute to greenhouse gases. Surely, in this day of technology and advancement, we can get beyond burning. This is what we're trying to move away from, burning. Regarding budgeting, I say every year, one cheap way to reduce black carbon in our environment is ban residential burning, especially during inversion months, where all of the pollutants are pushed down to where we breathe. I say this every month. It is something that can be done, and it costs nothing. And it makes it easier for enforcement. If burning is banned, then enforcement is so much easier. And yes, there are some people who have no other source, and those people, hopefully we can find some answer to that. But when we had our rains, we were just after rains, burning was simply discouraged, and the pollutants built up immediately. I'm glad to see that we are in a no burning for all now, but we need to stop the pollutants after the rains or after the winds, and all the time, especially during the inversion months. This is disappointing, especially no burning ban and biomass considerations, not the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas Menz.
Yes, Thomas Menz, resident of Fresno County again. I just wanted to remind the board not to contradict anything said in this presentation that emphasizes transportation emissions, that PM2.5 in the valley is both indirectly formed from NOx emissions and directly emitted from combustion sources like the burning of biomass and residential wood burning. And it helps your case that you're able to show that we're doing all we can to eliminate those direct emissions from those sources that form such a substantial part of the PM2.5 emissions inventory. Now, we have a PM2.5 plan in effect that is deficient in contingency measures and needs improvement, as EPA is determined, and as I'm sure your staff is aware. Additionally, there's another NOx component, emissions that have been shown to be coming from agricultural soils in the valley, a component that has not been adequately quantified. So as a part of building healthy soils, soils that could serve and do serve to retain and sequester significant amounts of carbon, we should be cognizant that NOx itself is a significant greenhouse gas and climate pollutant, and a factor that shouldn't be ignored. I'd also like to observe once again that there are no measures that counter criteria pollutants that do not also ameliorate or mitigate climate pollutants. And likewise, no measures to reduce climate pollutants that do not also have the added benefit of reducing criteria pollutants. Thank you.
Through the chair, we have no additional comment on Zoom, but we do have a person here who would like to speak, Mr. Manuel Cunha.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. You're doing an excellent job. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Hope everybody is well and safe, and thank you and congratulations to the chair and the vice chair, as well as the San Joaquin Valley Study Agency for those new members. I have a couple comments, and it's related to, first I want to thank Lynn Jaquez and Lynn from Sacramento as well for their efforts over the years of working on setting up meetings and all of that stuff. And of course, now the COVID has definitely changed several of those things. The one thing I do want to bring up to the board is about electric zero emissions. This last Thursday, we had a meeting with CARB. And this is probably for some of the folks at the board here. A 2022 truck that we call, some of you farmers understand, a 2.5 ton. It's 26,000 pounds and below. That truck, structure of the truck is 12,400 pounds, allows the farmer to put on about, or a company, to put on about 12 to 14,000 pounds on that truck, due through Hummingbird Manufacturing Company, with a farmer east of here, a tree farmer who is trying to work on a zero truck. The cost came back to the grower at $440,000 from a truck that cost 135 to 150, a 2.5 ton. It's 22-foot bed reefer. Here's the other problem that it ran into, and CARB was, I was disappointed, I really was, that in that electric vehicle, they changed the weight structure from a 26,000 pound truck to a 50,000 pound truck, which changes the entire weight structure. You have to go to a class 1 license, no longer a class C license. How many truckers are we having problems getting truckers at the ports in every business around? So CARB said, well, we'll have to look into those things. Actually, a document proving that if it was an 80,000 pound tractor, that truck would have to lose close to 7 tons of carrying ability of product. And that truck would be around $700,000 for an electric truck. I understand the importance but CARB has to work with our district and with the industries. There's no way our farmers are going to go buy a 50,000 pound truck from 26,000 pound. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. And giving $100,000 or those dollars, no way. So I just want to bring that to you, but I want to thank this board for your legislative platforms, for the ag, for the farmer and the ag burn. Thank you, the staff and everybody, for all the great job that you continually work with us in agriculture to feed the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. No one else? No.
The chair, no further public comment.
Okay, Dr. Sheriffs.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank our legislative advocacy partners in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. for their presentation and their great work. And a tip of the hat to staff for developing what I see as a very thoughtful and very collaborative legislative platform for our advocates to work with. And so thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, board members, I think there are a couple of points that were raised. I think just for the record, wanted to provide some quick clarification and then turn it back to you for potential action on the item. On the bioenergy front, just wanted to make sure it was clear that what we're advocating for is solutions in response to what is a massive organics stream set of issues. And we all know that whether it's wood waste, ag waste, food waste, and on a variety of fronts, that the region is faced with a number of different challenges. And so when we talk about biomass, or when the term biomass is used, you know, what we're not talking about is advocating for a particular model, or, you know, but what we're insisting on actually is every option to be considered, but from a clean air perspective. You know, so renewable energy, for example, you know, our position has always been that we're not even talking about necessarily even combustion. We're talking about, you know, what can be done to address what is a massive organics issue, and do it in a way where the latest technologies are used in a fashion that doesn't that actually helps us with our clean air challenge, not adds any extra burdens. I wanted to be clear on that and just try to respond to that question that was raised. And on the point about trade-offs, there are negative trade-offs at times, and we do pay attention to those when it comes to state measures versus local measures. You know, one of the big ones, for example, that I think probably many members of the board are aware of is when the Valley becomes home to a lot of strategies that maybe help the state as a whole when it comes to, say, organics diversion. You know, there's a lot of challenges that are going on in implementing that right now. So we're always paying attention to, you know, while we understand that there needs to be solutions put into place, you know, we also want to make sure that the Valley itself is always, you know, considered from a clean air perspective, and that we're very thoughtful in how these things are implemented, you know, so that while it may have a larger goal, the Valley is protected in those various efforts. And then just lastly, on the residential wood burning, you know, the board talks about that issue quite a bit. Just wanted to clearly state, you know, for the record, EPA has approved our rule as the most stringent measure as part of their approval process for a PM 2.5 plan. We continue looking at it. I think contingency will be a challenge. You'll hear about that in the next presentation. But EPA just recently proposed approval of our plan for the 2012 standard. They've already approved our plan for the 2006 standard. As part of that, they've approved our measures as most stringent measures, and we continue looking for new opportunities. You'll hear quite a bit about that in the next item. But wanted to state, you know, just for the record, you know, that we do take that issue very seriously and continue to push hard on reducing residential wood burning, and we'll look for opportunities in the coming year as we think about some of the upcoming plans that we have to continue refining. But with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, and board members for action on the item.
And thank you for that clarification. And I think that for some folks, this board, which is a very diverse board in a lot of aspects where people come from, there's the belief that we're not acting fast enough. And for business, you talk to business and they would tell you that we're acting way too fast for them to keep up with. So technology, just like today, when we're putting in the infrastructure for EV, you have to start with something. And then along comes the cars. You can't buy a bunch of cars without EV charging stations. So this is, we're living in a world where we balance things, but we're continually doing good. I've been in many meetings with Tom in Sacramento and in DC, and we talk about that nice little map over there where you have your bar graphs, 90% reduction and we still have another 90% to go. And all of the easy things were accomplished right off the get-go. And no thanks to me. I'm new to this board, but again, a lot of thoughtful processes, a lot of smart people have come up with the low-hanging fruit, which is the biggest bang for your buck. And now it becomes more difficult, as Dr. Sheriffs was talking about earlier, trying to get reductions for the best value. That's still a challenge. And so we'll continue to move forward and do better for sure. Supervisor Pereira. I forgot.
Thank you, Mr.
It's Pereira.
So this comment maybe is for, our question is for Sylvia. Are you familiar with the GSNR Golden State Natural Resource JPA that is has been organized by rural counties representing California?
I am not.
Okay, so basically rural counties representing California is the 39 smallest counties in California have our own association. And so we recently formed a JPA called GSNR, and we are working on putting in 2 pulp pelleting mills, one up in Lassen County and then one either in Tuolumne or Calaveras County. And that will be to take forest material, pellet it, and then export it. And so anyways, I just wanted to make you aware of that. Maybe, there's some synergy between what they're doing and what we're doing, and we don't, so that way we're not burning, biomass here in the valley, but anyways, it's that material can be exported and used for pulp and other processes. So anyways, just want to make you aware of that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Perfect.
Motion to approve.
So we have a motion to adopt.
Second.
For a second.
And okay. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bessinger,
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa,
Yes.
Mr. Couch has stepped away. Ms.
I'm back.
Pagazzi.
I'm a yes.
Oh, you're back. Okay, great. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. Ms. Pagazzi. I believe she has stepped away. Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
I did that.
Mr. Preciado.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rickman. Okay, thank you. Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 11 is receive update on air quality planning and regulatory efforts and approve additional resources.
How are you?
Good morning, Chair, and members of the board. My name is Shiraz Gill. I'm one of the deputy APCOs here at the district. Pleasure to
Nice to meet
see everyone and pleasure to meet you. So I'll be providing an update on air quality planning and regulatory efforts and recommend approval of additional resources. I'll try to move pretty quick here, but there's been a lot of work done. You've heard a lot today. District has adopted numerous attainment plans. We've been able to get significant emission reductions. We have the most toughest air quality program in the nation, strong incentive program. That number continues to tick up every time, $4.2 billion. But a lot of work still needs to be done, and we'll be working very closely with the CARB and EPA to identify additional measures and funding for the transformational transitions we need for new technologies. And as we talked about earlier, over 80% of NOx emissions come from mobile sources under the state and federal jurisdiction. So the status of the PM 2.5 attainment plans, your board adopted this plan in 2018, and subsequently CARB submitted it to EPA in 2019. This addresses multiple standards, and it also includes extensive regulatory and incentive measures. A lot of actions have been conducted by EPA. In June of 2020, they approved the plan elements of the 2006 plan, approval of our specific exceptional events enabling the valley to demonstrate attainment of 1997 24-hour standard in July of 2021. They disapproved certain elements of 1997 annual standard in July, but then subsequently your board adopted a new plan, and CARB adopted it in September in 2021, so that issue has been resolved. They also approved approval of moderate area plan requirements of the 2012 standard and reclassified San Joaquin Valley to serious. and a bunch of other things. So they've done quite a bit. And then this is the status of PM 2.5. If you look at these two charts, on the left-hand side is a 24-hour average design value, and on the right-hand side is the annual average design value. As you can see in 2003, not very good, but these two charts demonstrate that by 2024 and 2025, we will be able to attain these standards. Moving on to ozone attainment plans, your board has shown a lot of commitment in reducing ozone concentrations through multiple plans. There's a 2013 ozone plan that shows attainment of the 1-hour ozone standard. 2007 ozone plan, we're on track to meeting the 2023 deadline for that standard. And then 2016 ozone plan, we're also on track to meeting the 2031 deadline. We're also the first region to be classified as coming into attainment of the 1-hour ozone standard, and Valley is on track to meeting the 8-hour standard. And I'll show this chart here. If you can see, back in 1988, concentrations really high, but significant improvements of air quality over the years. And we're so close. Since we're in the playoffs, I'm going to use a football analogy. We're on the 1-yard line. We have several downs in all of our timeouts, okay? We've got plenty, we have 2 years to come into attainment, and if you can see, we're almost ready to hit that orange line. So very good progress. Also, the status of regulatory actions, your board has taken a number of actions to fulfill the commitments of the 2018 plan, and starting as early as June of 2019 and as most recent as December 2021. So a lot of work has already been done, and these measures exceed the district's emission reduction commitments from our plan. Upcoming planning and regulatory activities is anticipated to continue to grow in the coming years. That's because of the amount and complexity of the air quality planning and regulatory activities we have. And meeting health-based air quality standards are going to be very important for us as we improve public health. In addition to public health importance, we want to ensure that state and federal mandates are adequately addressed. So to avoid major punitive consequences under the Clean Air Act, permitting sanctions, as an example, non-attainment penalties, billions of dollars of loss of transportation funding, and then ultimately loss of local control, meaning federal EPA comes in and puts their own implementation plan together for the Valley. There's quite a bit of new plans coming up, and every 5 years, as we get closer to meeting some of these attainment standards, every 5 years, EPA actually goes through a very thorough and extensive process to review these standards, ozone PM 2.5 and other criteria, pollutants. And in October of 2015, they actually lowered the 8-hour ozone standard from 75 parts per billion to 70 parts per billion. And we've actually started working on that plan. We have till 2037 to come into attainment with that standard. Your board has already taken actions last year, the year before, to take care of some of the initial federal requirements. So there's quite a bit of work to do. This plan is going to come back to your board for consideration by mid-2022. So there's a lot of work that's remaining that will be going through a very robust public process. We'll be updating our stationary mobile source emissions inventory. A lot of extensive air quality modeling is needed and technical analysis. We'll be evaluating a number of measures. We'll also be talking about and evaluating potential contingency measures and addressing other federal requirements. Once the district or any region attains a standard, that's not enough. Then you got to go one step further to show how are you going to maintain that, and that's called a maintenance plan. These maintenance plans demonstrate ongoing compliance, and these are the number of maintenance plans that we'll be working on over the next year. EP is also currently in the process of evaluating new federal standards. So while we're working really hard and diligently to address these existing standards and getting closer, EP is working on new standards. And if they establish new standards this year or the following, we'll have to come up with new attainment plans and new measures. So that kickstarts the whole new process all over again. And developing multiple attainment plans and measures for multiple standards in the coming years is going to be a big lift and a huge challenge. And it's going to require a lot of attention and a lot of resources by the district. So contingency measures, we've talked about that. That's one of the most difficult things for any region, but especially ours, where we have already provided every single measure we can think of when we're putting these plans together. It becomes even more challenging for the San Joaquin Valley to come up with new contingency measures. Now, we do include contingency measures in our plan, but there's certain things, a recent court ruling regarding requires agencies to resubmit contingency measures to meet newly interpreted requirements. So we'll be working closely with CARB to develop these updated contingency measures. And this is going to require a lot of analysis, a lot of work. We'll have to think a little bit differently. How do we meet these requirements? There'll be stakeholder input that we'll need in a huge public process, working closely with CARB and EPA. And we anticipate your board and CARB's board considering this in October of 2022. So there's still a lot of work that EPA has in front of them. They have a number of measures, they have plans, and the work doesn't just stop when we submit something to CARB or to EPA. Many times EPA has additional information that they need from us, additional technical analysis that they need. So we work closely with CARB to respond to any inquiries and provide that additional technical support documentation and any other information that they need. And this workload is expected to be pretty high. It does take a lot of work for us to provide that additional information that they need based on the number of pending actions that they have. And potential further planning actions could be needed as attainment deadlines for ozone and PM 2.5 standards get closer. The control measure development, we still have a number of control measures that we're working on, and we believe that there'll be a high level of work associated with that. We'll be amending District Rule 4550, which is our conservation management practices rule, amendments to the petroleum refinery fence line air monitoring rule 4460 based on recent court rulings. We'll be evaluating a number of rules concerning volatile organic compound leak detection and repair requirements as part of our ongoing best available retrofit control technology efforts, and additional rulemakings through our rulemakings through our ongoing BARC analysis under AB 617. And then anything that we do under contingency, that thorough evaluation, there may be additional rulemakings there as well. Now, we talked about mobile sources making up a significant amount of emissions, over 80%. So the district will be working very closely and tracking a lot of things that EPA and CARB are doing. We'll be looking at the development of the 2022 state SIP strategy. We'll have to work closely with EPA and CARB on development and implementation of all of their emissions control program, because this category is going to remain very critical for us to be able to attain these very stringent standards. Exceptional events are going to be a huge amount of work over the next year. As you know, the last several years, we've been impacted severely by a large number of wildfires. And we have attainment deadlines, some key dates that are very near, 2023, 2024, and 2025. And we're going to need to do some extensive work when we track, document, and prepare these documents that are very extensive in nature. And they require high complex analysis and air quality modeling. And we'll need to submit those to EPA, work closely with CARB and ARB to be able to take that data out of the equation so we can attain these standards. The district also operates a very extensive federally mandated air monitoring network throughout the valley. This is the foundation for everything that we do here at the district: air quality planning, strategy development, and demonstration of how we show progress and how do we attain with these standards. The district also operates and maintains community air monitoring networks established under AB 617, multiple communities. And this requires a lot of work in order to operate a monitoring network 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It takes a lot of work. You have to maintain these things. You have to calibrate them. So a lot of resources go into this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Samir to wrap up this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Shiraz. And Mr. Chair, members of the board, I just wanted to wrap the presentation up. Well, first, thanks, Shiraz. I actually asked him to speed it up a little bit, entering into the items. So I think he gave you a slightly expedited version of the challenges that I think we're all going to face going into, this is the first month of 2022. And while certainly a lot of progress has been made and a lot of positive indications on EPA actions at the end of last year, we wanted to just walk the board and the public through the various upcoming challenges that we're going to face, and plans and other regulatory and other work that we're doing to continue moving the ball forward under the Clean Air Act. And so I think definitely try to lay that out fresh here early in the year. And it's critical. It's critical for this board, for the district, and for the valley as a whole that we continue really developing innovative plans, responding to changing requirements such as contingency. I think that's going to be a major challenge this coming year and pulling that together for all the reasons that were discussed. And certainly many things are going to be on the table for discussion. We talked about residential wood burning quite a bit today, where that lies in the future as we continue looking for opportunities. Many great suggestions have been raised by the public as we've had those discussions, and look forward to interacting through that process. A new ozone plan your board has to adopt. And then the exceptional events and all the data analysis that's so important. I want to emphasize that point. We're at a critical point in our journey here, being in the second year of the 3-year period that leads into, for the ozone standard, a 15-year process that we've been working on since 2007, adoption of that plan. We're now at that point where we, have been able to show the progress. We're so close to meeting that standard, as Shiraz just showed. So I just wanted to end the presentation by explaining a recommendation that we have. I see the slide's been taken off, but I'll just use my printed copy here. Given the importance of all these mandates and the real need for the valley to keep looking ahead and putting these critical plans into place, documenting the extensive data and working with EPA and CARB on these various issues, we are recommending that we add a director of planning and regulatory work here. It's going to be very important, I think, to the district as a whole that we plan this work effectively, that we provide some real focused leadership and guidance in this area, and really help move the ball forward, with the new plans that we have to write, with the attainment deadlines that we have to work very closely with the public on, and going through the community engagement process for these various things. By adding this director, we really provide that critical leadership there, while we also have strong continued leadership on the scientific front, because this board has always placed such a high value on letting science drive the development of the measures, to let the monitoring and the modeling and all the great work that our team does there. That serves as a foundation actually for everything that we do. And there's so much of that work that also has to happen when you think about one big example, the conservation management plans and the rules that we're looking at in those areas between SGMA, the fallowing, and all the various issues that go there. Quite a bit of science has been developed over the years, working very closely with our stakeholders. That's going to be another area. Just one of many examples of where we have to really place some serious, resource and attention to those issues as well, the exceptional events, the various modeling that goes into our plans. So we are recommending that as part of addressing these challenges moving forward, here at the beginning of this year, as we look ahead to the critical functions that we have here over the next couple of years. And I'll leave it at that. I do, just given on where we are on the agenda, we did give you a fairly expedited version of that presentation, but did cover quite a bit of material. We're happy to take questions and address any comments or questions that come up as part of this, a very important part of what the Air District does.
Supervisor Wheeler.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree if we need more people like that, I have no problem with that, but I don't know, these numbers don't add up on that last page. It says 92,000 physical impact, but a monthly salary of 11,000, that makes 142,968, and 92,000 is only $7,600 a month. So what's the difference there?
I can address that. Yeah, we're halfway through the fiscal year. So the first number is for the rest of this fiscal year. So it's a partial, that's the impact for this fiscal year, for the next 6 months.
So it is 142,000 then.
Yeah, and then there's some other costs that go into fiscal impact. There's some benefits and other things. So it's basically it's 6 months worth.
So
yeah,
I think it should be explained in there like that. It shouldn't. That's kind of misleading the way it's wrote right now. To me,
it's explained in more detail in the actual written item, Supervisor.
Yeah, I figured it would be.
Dr. Sheriff.
It's also covered, I think, in the budget resolution that's attached to the item as well.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I find the organization of these presentations has been helpful in sorting through very complicated and interlocking stuff. I would just observe, fantastic our progress in terms of ozone attainment. And certainly there's nothing wrong with beating a deadline. That's much more benefit to health out there in the community. And especially beating a deadline that's been extended over time as well. So that's very encouraging. It's amazing what's accomplished with the staff that we've got. And I realized during this presentation, because I'm always concerned about how climate change impacts our attainment abilities and how it complicates that increased heat, increased ozone production. Well, it also affects our maintenance plans, doesn't it? Because maintenance is not static. The environment is not static. And in fact, the environment is giving us increasing challenges. So important to be engaged on the climate change issues, and also a reminder of the complexity of what we're doing. And it certainly sounds appropriate to increase staff at this point to help with that.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Yeah, thank you. I really support the added dedicated staff person to be monitoring this, and no doubt there's really qualified people out there to do that kind of work. So very confident in that. Just one thing, I think that it really is important to know, in terms of our efforts, and I think this ties not just with what the district's doing, but what the district's doing in coordination with CARB, and certainly advocating to EPA to do. The exceptional events, while it is important to track those, from an attainment piece, it doesn't take away from the public health impact that these are continuing to have on our population, and sort of like the additive nature of that in terms of our existing air quality challenges aside from that. So I do think that it's important, especially given all the new studies that have come out this last year, tracking everything from preterm birth to life expectancy. When it comes to PM, I think that we must continue to push the envelope on getting as many reductions as we can, given that this quote unquote exceptional events are now becoming the norm to be expected every year. And so I think that, you're on the right track, and I hope that we can continue to work with all these other agencies as well to strengthen as much as we can at the federal and state level too.
Thank you. Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of the staffing enhancement, I'll call it, because everything we do is driven by data. And usually our data is the best data. I think you guys would agree, right? You're not going to disagree with that.
You better not.
So as long as we collect and can extrapolate good data, I think we can move the ball forward, because there's a lot of bad data out there that, we're basically having to fight against. So if we have the better data, and this gives us a chance to do that, I think this is a win for everybody.
Thank you much. I see no other board comments. Is there any public comment?
Through the chair, yes, we do. Ms. Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Thank you. Pollution reductions, not reduced enough, are a problem to those of us who have asthma and other respiratory diseases. All of the discussion, what matters to those of us who have trouble breathing to begin with due to our diseases, is air that is not unsafe. I like to ride my bike. I like to garden in my garden. I like to walk my dog. I like to be outside. And I'm housebound. I'm in the house that has air purifiers running, has MERV 14 filters in my HVAC. I have monitors in my car, in my home. that I take with me. This is not a way to live. We need focus on reducing. Thousands of us in this valley are like me. As Dr. Pacheco Warner pointed out, wildfires are going to be normal. And those complicate the health of everyone. The levels are so high. And what we must do is reduce all of the other greenhouse gas contributors, pollutions, in anticipation of the wildfires coming. In the winter, where all of this stuff is pushed down where we breathe, we are burdened with not being able to go outside safely, those of us who have respiratory problems. In the summer now, we are burdened by the wildfires. I just received an alert from district regarding the air is not safe for me to go outside. And this message came in to me during this discussion that everyone has been having regarding item number 11. I just received an alert from you guys that I must stay inside because the air is unsafe. I don't know if you can imagine what it is like to be afraid to go outside because of what can happen by breathing the air. Thank you.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item.
Okay, pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch, I believe, has stepped away. Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado? Mr. Preciado, are you there?
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. Dr. Sherritt?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
And Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 12 is appoint ad hoc subcommittee for hearing board reappointments.
Thanks, Michelle. Mr. Chair, members of the board, just a quick presentation on this item. This is to get an ad hoc committee, a subcommittee appointed to assist us in filling some vacant hearing board seats. Just as a reminder, every region of the district, we have 3 regions, North, Central, and South, is served by an independent hearing board, which hears petitions for variances, abatement orders, permit revocations, permit appeals, other related matters. And by statute, each 5-member hearing board has to include an attorney, a registered professional engineer, a medical professional, and 2 public members. So they're 5-member boards, 1 in each region. And there are primary and alternates that are appointed to these very important bodies. The terms of the members are 3 years and are staggered to maintain the continuity of the board. And so there's often a need to, on a regular basis, to fill these seats. And the terms of 6 attorney and engineer members are set to expire at the end of February of this year. So there's a need to have a subcommittee examine these appointments and help make recommendations to the board. So the board must either reappoint the existing members or appoint new individuals to the hearing boards. And so the subcommittee would assist with that. The tradition in the past has been for the board to appoint 2 board members from each region to serve on the ad hoc subcommittee to review, evaluate, and then make recommendations regarding reappointment of those members. And our counsel, Annette Bellatori, she would coordinate that process with the subcommittee members via email and phone. So it's a streamlined process. It's not a very extensive time commitment on the part of the subcommittee members. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, to maybe seek some volunteers and try to fill out that subcommittee.
So I can just tell you in the north that Fugazi and Pereira are willing to do it. So I'll make that recommendation. So let's talk about Central and
I'll do
this. Okay, so we have a couple of volunteers here. I guess, Annette, can you tell what's going on? Or you're keeping notes? Okay. And in the South Valley.
I'm keeping notes.
South Valley, are there any volunteers? That would be Supervisor Couch is no longer on. That would be Craig Peterson, Supervisor Peterson. That would be, okay.
If
Who else?
I meet the standard, I'm not sure if I'm central or
Oh,
you are.
far enough south.
Well, I say since Couch isn't here, we just put him in there.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good job.
So who are the members?
Can you, Michelle, could you just kind of run down the list that you have so far, just to make sure?
Oh,
That
sure.
I might have heard 3 in the South. Let me just,
So for Central, I have Bessinger and Mendez. For the North, I have Fugazi and Pereira. And then in the South, Peterson. And so we need one more in the South.
in the South, Peterson would be Central
He
region.
would be Central. So it
Yeah,
would be
so, I
Reyes,
think we're already, so I think we're
Shockley.
filled out in the Central, so I think we're good there. And then
So Reyes, Shockley, and Couch are all.
that'll be 3 in the South, so.
Outs aren't on, you said.
Okay, can you check with them and then, unless Amy, you're willing to do it right off the get-go.
It's honestly such a
Jacqueline,
very
Henry.
streamlined process. It takes almost very, very little of your time.
Yeah, that's fine. I just had to find my unmute button. Yes.
Those two, Sheckley and the chair.
Yeah.
Reyes,
Yes,
you got it.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all. Item number 13 is verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities.
Okay, oh, we had a request. Okay, so Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Okay, thank you, board. Pretty much we're just getting started this year. Lots of things to look forward in the following months, not so much January, but in the following months, in regards to continuing to implement some of the legislative and executive orders on moving towards zero emissions in cars and fleets. And so definitely, I think for me, I'd really like to take this time to invite people to really engage with me in the San Joaquin Valley on these issues of electrification, you know, wanting to hear everything from infrastructure to feasibility and what it's really going to take in the San Joaquin Valley. You know, because we are hearing from big companies and big, you know, statewide and national groups, but it's important, I think, for us to hear from the San Joaquin Valley. So not so much a report as a call out for folks to engage in this these really important upcoming processes on our electrification of our private and car fleets in this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments regarding the update? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to Executive Director, public.
Oh, no, through the chair,
Okay.
no public comment.
All right, thank you.
Executive Director, correct.
Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. A couple of quick updates for you. Wanted to highlight the fact that we have our Healthier Living kids calendars, bilingual, available. So we're stocking our regional offices with these, but if any board members would like some of these to distribute to your constituents, we're happy to make those available to you directly as well. Just wanted to and also invite the public, any member of the public who would like to receive a copy of these. We'll have these available at our offices, and they're great, just great examples of what youth throughout the valley are thinking about. When it comes to air quality, this wonderful art in here, just terrific messaging. I just want to highlight this one example here. Just randomly open it up. It's an image of kids, and the theme here is working on our environment. So just a lot of really positive messaging and very thoughtful submissions this year. I also wanted to just note that there's quite a bit of outreach and education underway right now as it relates to eliminating, hopefully, residential wood burning. It's something that the board has placed a tremendous level of focus on these last several years on focusing on the health impacts of it, the incentives that are available, and really just trying to reach. We have continually receive new ideas from board members like Councilmember Bessinger in terms of trying to reach maybe some of our more senior populations, and we're already looking at and implementing some things that we can do to really reach out. So that is a big priority for us right now, and are also focused really heavily on the ag burn transition. There's deadlines that have come recently as part of the board's adopted transition. There's funding available. So that's a really high priority for us, and really working to make sure the agricultural community is aware of the requirements and available resources, and particularly smaller, farming operations or growers are just receive the assistance that is available to help with that transition, and that we're already making significant progress in that area. And then lastly, just a quick COVID related update is I'm sure everybody is going through right now. There's quite a bit of cases out there, exposures, impacts related to COVID certainly has impacted the staff here as well. But I am happy to report that all our programs are fully up and running. We're able to manage that, working very closely with our wonderful staff. And part of that is continued telecommuting, where that's feasible. And I think overall are able to have been able to respond well, and just wanted to report out to the public and the board that, even with these impacts, the services are fully available, and our lobbies here are open if anybody needs to come in and get assistance as well, with all the appropriate protections that we've been able to put into place. And I'll close with that update and put my mask back on. Make sure we're all here protected. And thank you for the time, Mr. Chair and board members, and I'll happy to take any questions.
Any questions of the executive director? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to item 15.
Item 15, governing board member comments.
Perfect. Any board member comments? Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. And following up on Samir's last comments, although Omicron is less virulent, less lethal, it's certainly more infectious, and the absolute number of disasters, there it is in the front page of the B today. Fresno County hospitals pushed to capacity amid surge, and this is very serious. We're all very tired of the masks. They are no fun. I will never forget having my hearing aid fling off back in March of 2020, never to be seen again as I removed my mask, so it's been a learning curve. My ears certainly are not designed to carry glasses, hearing aids, and the mask. It's not fun. We're all weary and tired of this, but thanks to everyone for persisting. Thanks especially to staff for masking, protecting yourself, protecting the public, protecting people around us. And we carry on. Thank you.
Thank you much. Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, I just want to thank Vito for chairing a great meeting, and I don't know how much of warning he got about having to chair this meeting, but he must have got some because he drove here.
I was driving here anyway. So.
Yeah, but I thought you did a great job, which you did not disappoint me because I knew you would.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, Councilmember Bessinger.
Thank you. I have some good news. Back in 2019, 2020, the board approved a program for the replacement of law enforcement vehicles with either hybrid or electric vehicles. Specifically, the hybrid is the Ford Explorer, and the electric vehicle is the new F-150. We have our first two are just prepared. Fresno State got them. They got them in the middle of their fiscal year, so they had to wait until They did the purchase last year. They did the outfitting this fiscal year. I'd love to be able to get them to get staff to do a little social media on this for two reasons. One, it's a great program because I've been the chief of police for 5 different agencies in the Valley, and in 3 of the agencies, their vehicles had very high mileage. And one of the first things that you do as a city or a county when you hit some difficult times financially is you figure out, what can I put off buying? And one of the things that gets put off a lot is vehicles. Because we're just going to extend that. Well, you're rolling the dice because you have vehicles that get driven pretty hard. Law enforcement vehicles get driven pretty hard. And if you extend it another year, you're going to have more downtime, which means your existing vehicles are going to get higher mileage because you don't have as many vehicles. So it's tough. And so what I'd like to do is get staff to work with Fresno State, do some press on this. And then what we can do, because most of the cities and counties now are in budget prep. So this is the time to get to them, especially our smaller cities, when I believe the out-the-door price for the Fresno State vehicles were $55,000. We gave them $20,000 per vehicle. That is a lot of money, especially to a small jurisdiction that needs to get 2 vehicles off of their fleet. And it just puts us in a good position with cost savings, maintenance, because maintenance on most of these vehicles is covered by the dealer for 5 years. So that's your fleet maintenance costs go down, and your fuel costs, which have been skyrocketing, will tank, literally and figuratively, no pun intended. But it's a great program. I'm proud of the district for coming up with it. And I'd like to see more law enforcement vehicles driving down the road with a little sign on the back that says, grant funded by the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Wheeler?
Yeah, thank you. You did do a good job today. Surprised me. No, I knew you would. You've always done real good running meetings over the years working together. I just wanted to report that all of last year we had, where I live up there in the mountains, had 15.15 inches of rain, 15 inches. And of December, since we haven't had any since, we've already had 15.73. So we've already had more rain than we did for all of last year, but now we're going back into that bad mode. So just wanted to report that. Thank you.
Perfect. Supervisor Sheklian.
Yeah, quick question for staff, and it's probably too late for this year, but do we have a presence ever at the World Ag Expo? I'm just wondering, especially with, our farmer grants and the, the no ag burning situation now, just curious.
Yeah. Thanks, Supervisor. Great question. We do have a presence there, as a matter of fact, and we've been planning on participating this year to advertise and build partnerships as it relates to the tractor fleet upgrade programs, the electric ATVs, electric yard trucks. See what new technologies are also available for our own seeking of opportunities. So it's been a great place to continue pushing these various clean air initiatives within the agricultural community. I think the ag burning phase out is another one of those big priorities now, with a lot of the new technologies that are being deployed. When it comes to chipping and some of the other kind of related pathways. So yeah, no, it's absolutely something that's on our radar, and we do look forward to participating this year.
Okay, cool.
It's a great idea.
Do we have a booth or?
We've done it. I'll check in with that. We've done it different ways. We've had booths before.
Okay.
We've also partnered with local, so for example, if Tulare County has a booth, I'm not sure if they do this year or not, but sometimes we just take advantage of local partnerships too, as sort of our getting our foot in the door, and then we have staff basically from our grants programs, and other programs there.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Perfect. Supervisor Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Vice Chair, Plan Chair. Anyways, I just want to raise a concern, and I don't know if we can advocate really from our platform or not. But as the governors in our state is moving towards electrified vehicles, which I support, but I just worry our electric grid already fails us, especially in the summer when it's hot. And so, is somebody from our organization advocating for, promoting grid reinforcement or fortification, and then also, more hydroelectric power. If we switch to electric vehicles, and the renewable energy is what it is, we're just going to be burning more coal across the country. And I just don't think that that's a viable solution. And so anyways, I just wanted to raise that point. Thank you for the time.
Supervisor, just a quick response. And I think unless there's any objections from the board, I wanted to, I think our platform does cover this issue, and it'll give us some latitude to continue pushing for grid resiliency, as well as looking at some new technologies, as it relates to shoring up the power capacity issues. And as you've seen in the summers, there's these heat events that sometimes cause some resiliency issues as well, in addition to the expanded electric vehicle issue. So it is something that's on our radar that we've been pushing for. I know that the infrastructure package that was approved last year has funding for grid resiliency as well as hydro, but these are like big, high-level programs, billions of dollars nationally. I think the details of how they're implemented. So we're at a phase now where I think if we had a good understanding at the federal level of what these programs are, and then if we were able to partner with the cities and the counties and whoever else to make sure that they're aware and that these programs are prioritized in areas like the San Joaquin Valley, or in this case maybe even California. That's one of the, so it's shifting now from having those billions in the infrastructure package to how do you actually make sure they're delivered in an effective way, to our region. So that's something that we're paying attention to as well. And I know the state budget also has some resiliency in there as well, but yes, if the board is okay with it, just as an ongoing priority in that area, unless I hear objection, that is something that we'll certainly respond to your suggestion on that.
Okay, and then just a little bit of a follow-up, if I may. The state has really there was two major projects of water storage being presented. One was the Sites Reservoir up north of Sacramento. The second one was Temperance Flat here on the Friant in Millerton Lake. And if Sites is approved, and it looks like that's where the state is going, that requires the water to be pumped into the reservoir and then back out. So it's kind of a net neutral, I guess, energy production. But the Temperance Flat site would certainly produce clean energy. And so I just wanted to remind you of that as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Dr. Sheriff, no, it just popped up. And lastly, I guess the last word, I want to thank everyone for showing patience for me today. As I learned this, I had said to Samir before, one of the most difficult boards to sit on, trying to learn all the funding sources and the programs and the emission reduction is very difficult. And this is a long-term, people shouldn't sit on this board for a couple of years. They need to sit on for more than a couple of years. And I know that you do. I've got a lot of support. To all my new friends that I met today, it was a pleasure. I know I'm going to meet some more, especially to Michelle, who never is on, in the limelight, but she keeps everything running around here. And I think your position is deputy clerk manager, but I'm going to call you executive director light. So for sure. Samir, thank you. I appreciate, we do have a closed session today. And
yes, we do. We have a closed session item, conference with legal counsel in the existing lawsuit, Comité Progreso de la Mont versus the Air District in Fresno County Superior Court. And we do need to see if there's public comment on that item before heading into closed session.
And through the chair, I see no indication of public comment on this item.
Okay, so if there's nothing else for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned to closed session.